Okay. Okay, cool. We're
We're
live.
live.
And I feel like since we're starting a bit later, we can just hop right into things.
Let's do
Um,
it.
so, hi everyone. Welcome to our Past It Classics live show for A Room with a View by E.M. Forster, which I forgot to put the cover back on my copy of the book, but here it is. Um, and I'm here with Cara from Wild Book Garden and Julia from Shakespeare and stuff. Shakespeare and
It is tough, honestly.
um, and before we get into the book, why don't you guys introduce yourself, your channel, and your history with this book and or E.M. Forster. And why don't we like do a little themed question and go like, what's your favorite place that you've ever been to while on vacation?
Ooh.
That's a
Well,
good
that's
one.
fun.
Yeah.
It's a lot of questions in one question. Whoever's ready to go first can go.
I already forgot everything. Introduce ourselves, familiarity with the book, and favorite vacation spot.
Yeah.
Cool, gotcha. Julia, Shakespeare and Such. Don't post a lot of videos, but I try to. I talk a lot about historical fiction and classics and romance and a little bit of everything. It's always a fun surprise to see what you get. And I have never read any E.M. Forster before this. This was my very first, and this was my first time reading it also. But I feel like it is important to state that specifically this copy of this book was annotated for me by my friend Sarah from Sarah's Perusal. So she can't be here. She's at work. But I know she's going to watch this later and have a lot of feelings.
What? With so
So,
much time we gave everyone.
With
So much
it's like
warning.
it's like a pop-up live show. Like you never know where we'll be. It's just
well, and
surprise.
it's just our luck because she only works every other weekend. So it was like either it's going to be perfect or it's going to be a no go. And it just is what it is. But I knew with us having this on deck and that she already, before we had picked it, was going to annotate this for me, that it was one of her favorite books and that I'd be getting her thoughts alongside my reading experience. So that has, in a sense, also colored my experience reading. And then, so I am not a very, what's the word? Well-traveled, yeah, individual. The only places that I've been outside of the United States are Canada, which shouldn't count because I live in Michigan. And then Spain randomly out of all places because I went on a trip in high school. So I'm going to be really basic and just say my favorite place that I have been several times is New York. I just love New York.
I love New York too.
I know. There's theater, there's shopping, or maybe equally Chicago. I feel like Chicago and New York are pretty on par for me. Good theater, good shopping, fun restaurants. That's all. I just want to go places that have like culture. My mom is a big like nature traveler. She's like, let's go to the beach. Let's go see some rock formations, a waterfall. I'm like, show me art.
Yeah.
So
if you're ever in New York City, you should hit me up because it's a 3-hour train ride for me. So very easy.
I'm overdue. So I'll take you up on that. Believe you me.
Cara?
So, hi everyone. My name is Cara. My channel is Wild Book Garden. I also read a ton of different things: classics, historical fiction, fantasy, contemporary nonfiction, sprinkle in some like sci-fi and romance occasionally. I also read across all age ranges. That's another thing that's very important to me. I like started a whole book club about it. Um, Variety is the spice of life, as they say. I also had never read a book by E.M. Forster before, and I also realized that I had like the weird thing about like reading a lot of classics, but obviously none of us have read all the ones that we're like interested in or that we know about. The weird thing about that is that I find that I sometimes have like like thoughts about what the book is going to be about, or like I kind of mix it up with another book, or for whatever reason I just get a vibe that it's going to be a certain kind of story. And I was way off on this one. Like I was expecting it to be, I don't want to get into specifics, but like I was expecting it to feel like The Age of Innocence by Edith Wharton in like the way that things resolve or don't resolve. So I was pleasantly surprised by some of the story elements. But yeah, I had like no idea what to expect from this.
Cara, that's really wild that you say that, because that was one of the like comp titles in my head. I was like, I feel like reading this gave me the same feelings as what I read Age of Innocence.
Yeah, like overall I like Age of Innocence more, but I find A Room with a View more narratively satisfying. So interesting.
I've never read Age of Innocence.
Put it on the list.
Yeah.
I got it up.
It is excellent.
It's really good.
And then there is like one thing that will irritate me until the day I die. But so, you know, the usual. It's just how we read books. As far as favorite place I've been, I also don't travel super often. And it's funny because in general, I also wouldn't describe myself as like a nature traveler, but I think the most like memorable and like effective place I've been was Redwood National Park, which is funny because it's very very close to me. It's in my area, essentially. And that was like one of the most profound like travel experiences I've had. Like I thought it was beautiful. I would 100% go back again. In terms of more like, you know, traveling outside the country, I haven't been a ton of places, but like I've been to Ireland and Scotland and I loved that. Also, I did get to go to the British Museum, which obviously there's a lot of like problems associated with what they have, but I did get to see the Egyptian Book of the Dead, which was incredibly cool. And it's one of those things where I'm like, you shouldn't have this, but also I'm glad I got to see it. Like, I don't know, you know,
that's like the feeling. I've been to the British Museum too, and I didn't get to see the Book of the Dead, but I saw the Rosetta Stone, and for some reason that took up all my attention because I was like, guys, look at this freaking stone.
It's real. Yeah.
We're looking at the stone, and I could not be moved.
Yeah, exactly. So I gave you 3 answers. I totally cheated. Sorry.
I think I kind of did too. I was like, oh.
And I should have specified that it doesn't need to be a place out of the country. Like, obviously, there's no place like home.
Yeah.
Sometimes in the case of America, but we do have some great places to visit.
No, but like in my heart, if I have been more places outside of the United States, I think one of them would be my answer. Because like Italy, reading this book, Italy is my dream destination for so many reasons. So like reading this book, I was like, take me there.
So I'm Taylor from Page Screen Taylor. I have been thinking about filming videos recently. I've been thinking really hard which counts. And when I read, I've been in more of a fantasy sort of focus. But I just read my first romance post-breakup, and I loved it. Well, okay, it wasn't great, but I had a lot of fun reading it. Anna Maria and the Fox by an author.
I want to read that one. I'm glad to hear you loved it.
Yeah, it's not a perfect book, but I really, really enjoyed it. And so in general, I read a lot of fantasy and romance and science fiction and classics, but I also try to read across age ranges, though I do move more towards adult fiction now, but, you know, I'm not picky. Like, if someone tells me to read something and it sounds good, I'll read it.
Exactly.
In terms of my favorite vacation that I've been on, I've also been to, like, a few places. I actually have been to Florence, and I'm just so disappointed there wasn't, like, a scene of them going to see the Statue of David and then going around the museum going, which Ninja Turtle painted this? Which is what my friends and I did. But I think my favorite vacation destination would be like the 3 months I studied abroad in London. It was like really cool doing research there, taking the tube and all that stuff. But I also have this like annual like vacation I do with my friends, where we go to my friend's family's lake house in Connecticut for a long weekend, and we do like we have our own little routine. We have a barbecue, an art project, we swim, we kayak, we canoe, we stay on the deck and we read for hours. It's like amazing, and it happens every year. And this last year it happened on what would have been mine and my ex's anniversary, and it was like the perfect remedy.
Yes.
That does sound amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also the burgers are so good during the barbecue.
Yeah.
But that's enough about me talking about my vacations.
It's very on topic though for the book.
Mhm.
Like,
It is. So digging into A Room with a View, we just have a few content warnings. I feel like this is relatively lighter than some of the other books we've read.
Oh yeah.
yeah.
So we have cheating, in parentheses, kind of, murder, xenophobia, and general misogyny and classism. So with that, let's go into our overall thoughts and ratings. I think, Julie, you went first last time, so Kara, if you could kick us off.
Sure. So I liked it. Was talking a little bit about how even though there's no reason I should have thought that I knew what this book was going to be like, it was still different. I gave it a 3.5 stars. So I enjoyed it, but I think like the writing is fantastic, and I'm sure we'll get into that, and that definitely contributed to my enjoyment. But like I think the characterization, and especially one of the main relationships, was underwhelming for me. I do appreciate that the book was so short. I think it's a very accessible classic in like the best way while still having great writing. So there were a lot of things I enjoyed about it, but like I'm a character reader, and even though I loved some of like the thematic elements and like the quotations and um some of the themes I think were done well, I didn't feel like I was really emotionally like invested and pulled in. Like I had things I wanted to happen, and there were things that I was happy about at the end and some things I had mixed feelings about. So like I did care, but I wanted to be a lot more I wanted to be a lot more invested than I was, I think.
Yeah, okay, makes sense. Julia?
I go, fair, as I get ready to say, I gave it 5 stars.
Yeah.
I really liked it a lot. I cried many times, mostly not because of the romance at all, mostly just because of things that Mr. Emerson was saying. I love that man so much. I don't know what it is about every time he opens his mouth, but I'm like overcome with emotion. I think I don't even know how to sum up a lot of my thoughts, because I also usually describe myself as a character-driven reader, but I think because I went into this, I think I knew that there was romance, because you see, like, as classic girlies, period drama girlies, I'm sure you guys see, like, on social media, like screen caps of like period drama films and like, you know, the same. So I always see that same one of them like kissing in the flowers. And in my head, I just assumed like that's the end of the story. And so I'm like, oh wait, this is like probably that scene from the beginning of the story. But getting ahead of myself, I always had this book in my head like categorized as like a coming of age novel more so than a romance. And I think that lens made me enjoy it more because the romance was taking a backseat for me. And I just thought it was really intelligently crafted. Obviously the writing is beautiful. We agree on that. But even things like, I'm really usually the picky person about like pacing. And we have that huge, like, I don't know how long, but like that time jump between part 1 and part 2 where it's like she got proposed to twice and we didn't witness this, and I started to like freak out. But then I was like, that's actually so smart that he did that. Sorry, are we getting into spoiler territory already?
Yeah, let's do it.
I think go for it.
Went for that. Sorry, I have a lot of thoughts. I finished it today, so yeah. But then I was like, actually that's genius, because like me, if I had gotten those scenes of like Cecil starting to fall for Lucy, I would have started to do my devil's advocate thing and been like, well, he does suck, but he does genuinely care about Lucy, and like spiraled. But instead, we just got the sucky part of him, and then just a little glimmer of like, wait a
I
second
know.
at the end.
Yeah. I'm like, what a prick. And then he has that one scene. I'm like, oh.
I know.
I'm just like, so mad at him. She's like, why are you being reasonable now?
I know. She's like, I want to just like hate you and get over it. And I'm like, relatable. Yeah.
I was adding things in between like Sarah's annotations, and I was like, wait, hot? Is this hot? What are you saying right now? I think I like it. Anyway, so then I was like, that's actually genius, because it's like helping frame the story the way it needs to be framed, like where he wants it to go. I just thought so many great themes and motifs, and I had emotions, and I'm very interested in all the characters, even the ones who suck. I had a great time. 5 stars.
I love that. So like you, Kara, I gave it 3.5 stars, but it's like 3.5 stars almost to 4 stars. I love the writing. I thought it was like beautiful and accessible too, which I think is really important. In like when you want to introduce a classic to someone, you want to make sure it's something that they could pick up and read and understand very easily. Yeah. It's a very accessible classic. It's short, which I like, because, you know, I do love me some long classics, but sometimes it's like, okay, you're doing too much. You think you're cooking, and like, and this is just me yelling at Victor Hugo, really.
This is a Victor Hugo subtweet. Like,
you think you're cooking, but it's burning. Stop. Take it off the stove.
Shut up about the damn sewers. And in terms of like the characters, I liked them, though sometimes they were just like a little frustrating, which I understand is like the point, but sometimes these characters, like, I just couldn't be with them for more than maybe a page. I did like the character of Lucy. I liked her journey a lot. And I sort of, like, in my mind, likened her to a younger, less mature version of Anne Elliot. Just sort of like the journey she goes through. And sort of like,
the way we both went,
really the same movement.
We're so in sync. Our classics club is just...
Taylor says something insightful. Kara and I go,
Yeah. And me going, look, Mom and Dad, that BU degree paid for itself, didn't it? No, my parents were very supportive of the degree. It's just So, you know, there was a lot I liked about it. I think where the issue came from for me is, like, I don't think it's the best book translated to audiobook, just because, like, I don't know, it reads so well that sometimes it was easy to like zone out, if that makes sense. Like it flowed and the voice acting was really good. And I feel like if I had read the physical book, I think it would have been a better experience for me. So that's not to say like I'm not giving that a mark against the book, but just in terms of my overall enjoyment, I think reading it physically would have been a lot better.
Yeah.
But you know me, I procrastinate on everything. So.
I told you I finished the book today, so
I finished so late last night, it was technically this morning, so
yeah.
We're all so prepared.
Yeah. But we're here, we finished it, okay?
That's right. That's what
exactly.
matters.
So just like the first thing that stood out to me when reading the book, and so it was like the first question I wanted to get into. What do you think that Forster thinks of British tourism, Italy, and Italian culture? Because, and I know that's sort of like a 3-part question, but it is something that kept popping up for me during like part 1 of the book.
Mm-hmm.
Julia, I think it's your turn to go first.
Sure, now it's my... No, I'm just kidding. Taylor gives us an intellectual question, and I have to go first. No, I think obviously he's like real quick to make fun of a tourist, like just right off the bat. Wait, say the 3 things. Italy, British tourism,
and Italian culture.
Oh, and Italian culture.
Well, I guess like Italian people. Let me check mine. Yeah, I know my own questions. Italian culture, yeah.
Okay. It was pretty interesting to me because I did actually, because I want to go to Italy so bad. I did. Okay, so let me back up. Sarah did annotate this. All these tabs are mine because she hates tabs. So I was also annotating on top of her because I'm that I'm that person. And so I had one that was all like just about Italy, and I think it's interesting that like kind of across all the characters, all of them really have this view of Italy as being like this more like romantic, wild, like less civilized place
Yes.
than England, which is like hilarious from a European point of view. But yeah.
Yeah.
Um, uh, and sorry, I'm like choking. And I think that serves like narratively as a really good, can use foil for settings, like comparison to England when we return there, just because we're kind of seeing like the different sides of characters and how, especially for Lucy, how she behaves in different settings and how those places alter her as a person. Um, yeah, I'm going to stop my thought there for right now.
Yeah, so I'm incredibly conflicted about how that was handled because I think it is very clear E.M. Forster is really like poking fun at like British tourists and this kind of I don't even know like what word I'm looking for, but it's like the sort of like cultural sightseeing, but like in a negative way. So I definitely think there is that criticism here, but I was also like incredibly uncomfortable with how actual like Italian people were
Mhm.
portrayed. I mean, the fact that like George and Lucy have like their meet cute when somebody like a random Italian man gets like murdered in front of them,
Yeah.
and the way that that is like talked about, like there is sympathy there from the characters, but also like the way it's talked about in the narration is like, yeah, that Italy is this really like dirty and like uncivilized and like they have feelings, they don't have thoughts. Um and I feel like that really colored like all of the scenes that were set there. And I also, this always bugs me about books that involve like traveling like this and like with American characters as well. It's like they go to another country and there's like absolutely no characters who actually live there. Like even the Senora, it's like we're told that she's actually Cockney, which is funny, but it also means that they don't actually interact with anybody except like the cab driver. um I don't know. And obviously like the the portrayal of like another European country is like not on the same level as the way that like, you know, non-Western countries are described. So I'm not like equating those things. Um, but it felt like really condescending, and it was weird because like on the one hand you have the author clearly criticizing the way people will visit, but also like the whole narration of the story is kind of enforcing this idea of like, yeah, they make great art, but they're really like dirty and like less intelligent. And it's just like the weird like double think of like they create these incredible works of art and like we go here to see them, but also like everybody is like a dirty stupid peasant, you know. Like it's just they like have both of those thoughts at the same time. Yeah,
Italians
so
be stabbing.
yeah, like it's just the way that scene was talked about. It was they were like, ah, yes, the hot-blooded Italian murderer over here. Like it just felt very uncomfy to me. And it happened a lot because obviously they're in Italy for a big part of the book, and it's a very significant like setting for all of them. And it just I wasn't having a good time.
Yeah. I can hear what you're saying for sure because it's like there's either like a murder happening or they're like making out with someone or
Mhm.
they're like buy my stuff, buy my photos. You know,
Yeah.
like it's yeah, we don't get a lot of very just like human normal interactions with the
Yeah.
actual
Like
Italian
nobody,
citizens.
none of the like even the people that they have passing like interactions with, like none of them are treated as if like they're smart or they know what they're doing. Or yeah, like that weird thing with like their tour guide who like brought his girlfriend along, and like that too, it's like, oh yeah, the oversexed Italians, it's like literally he can't even like go the length of this trip without like making out with his girlfriend. Like it was weird.
Yeah, it's like they turned it into an Italian thing and not a. It's just unprofessional to kiss your partner on the job.
And the fact he's like, it's my sister. It's like,
Yeah.
that would be worse. That would be way
Whoa.
worse.
It's literally that scene in Rent when they're doing La Vie Boheme. She goes, "Hey, mister, she's my sister." That's what it was.
Yeah, I think like something about like the whole hot-blooded Italian thing. Like I obviously Ian Forster, I feel, is using that sort of like stereotype to sort of like explain like Lucy starting to realize how like restrictive society is and sort of finding that like freedom and like discovering that the people she spends time with are really shallow, and sort of like the kiss she has with George, and then you go back to England where they're all very like fancy and logical, and that's when she's with Cecil and with her family and playing the role that she is supposed to play.
Sorry. In this moment, me realizing that they're British and you listened to the audiobook and that probably is how his name is pronounced. I didn't say it that way in my head the entire time while reading. Yeah.
Yeah, I had to keep reminding myself. I'm like, I know this is supposed to be Cecil, but I don't know
I know.
if we're gonna say it that way.
Cecil.
Cecil.
Anyways, carry
on. But yeah, I felt like the treatment of Italians was very odd. And like part of it is E.M. Forster also saying like these people come here for the culture, but they don't seem to care about the people, and they don't even entirely seem to care about the culture as much as they claim they do. It's all very superficial. Sort of like we summered in Florence and nothing, but also I don't know, they're like, Italians are Catholic and that's real stupid of them. Or like Italians just be murdering people in the streets, and no, we're not going to like check in on that guy or explain like what happened.
Like it was wild. Like Lucy literally gets splattered with blood, and they're like, man, Italians just be like that. Like
like, is he okay?
Yeah, and the fact, what was it that we find out later what he was killed over, and I think it was like 5 lire or something.
Oh yeah,
it was
yeah.
like a
it was
tiny amount of, which again, it's like, oh, they're so like poverty stricken that it's like an animalistic almost. Like it was weird.
Yeah.
It's weird because in any large city, you're going to come across places that are just violent. It's not just Italians. London has the same thing too.
Yeah.
Apparently not for E.M. Forster. He's like, everything is perfect.
I don't know, but I feel like he was really open to just making fun of everyone. Like, I don't think he had it out for Italians. Like, every single tourist, he was like, and this is why Miss Lavish is an idiot. And this is why this guy sucks. And then, like, even things that characters were saying back in England. I don't think they were specifically in London.
I just threw out London like a major
But
city.
Like, what's his name? Her fiance was being like, oh, and our children, I don't want them to have a London education. And then he was like, oh wait, I had a London education. Unless they're boys. Like,
yeah, that was funny.
I can't wait to talk about Cecil.
Oh my god,
the biggest clown.
Yeah, I see what you mean, Julia. I think for me, like the reason it didn't feel equal is that even though he is making fun of the English tourists a lot, I think there's always this undercurrent, like by the end of the book at least, of like respect, because like when like he talks about how silly the Miss Allens are. They're like these very like uptight older women. Look at them doing their silly little like digestive tablets and trotting around to Greece and all that. But then the way he talks about it at the end is very like admiring almost. And I feel like even Miss Bartlett, who is also written not terribly sympathetically, we see that she's given these like glimmers of like personality and humanity and everything. And I know that like obviously this is our group of main characters, so he's not going to characterize all of the people they come across in the same level of detail, but it felt to me like even though there were other characters that he was making fun of. It wasn't in the same way. Like none of the English people that are like made fun of are like talked about as being like dirty peasants, you know, or like unintelligent or like not deserving their culture almost. I guess a little bit with Freddie, but it's not I don't know, it feels different to me. But I
Yeah,
see what you're saying.
I think how it came across to me is that E.M. Forster wasn't like intending to go out and say like, "Man, don't Italians suck?" But it's sort of like not to the same extent, obviously, but Harriet Beecher Stowe writing Uncle Tom's Cabin with this idea to point out like how hypocritical the South is with owning slaves, but she ends up doing like black people are just simple folk and all they want to do is praise God and be left alone. And it's like, well,
Yeah. Yeah.
like I get what you're doing here and I
Right.
appreciate it, but
Like the intentions may have been in the right place, but there's
Mhm.
like a lot of unexamined issues. Like
Yeah.
like
yeah.
okay, cool, you believe black people are people. That's step one.
Great first step. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're doing amazing, sweetie.
Yeah.
um so I don't know if there was anything else you guys wanted to talk about in terms of like the setting and sort of tourism, Italy, Italian culture, but I also did want to move into sort of like the social class aspect.
Okay, let me add just one final thought to that
Yes.
one. I love it was literally just one paragraph where he listed like every souvenir that they bought and then was like, and
Yes.
probably could have bought them for cheaper in London. Like that was
I
so
yes.
funny.
That
Yeah.
scene was like really funny and them buying all these little like useless trinkets.
Yeah,
Yeah.
here's a miniature
Like
statue, and
like
here's
some
a
of the travel stuff was like really spot on and clever. Like
Yeah. Like people really are the same across time.
yeah.
yeah.
Uh yes, that was a very funny scene. Um and so like in terms of social class, I have what role does social class play in this novel? I couldn't think of an even smarter question than that, so we're gonna go with that one. But like just like social class?
Yeah,
Question mark? Yeah.
it's a Julia question, you know.
Thoughts? Yeah.
Thoughts? Elaborate. Let's unpack that.
Yeah. I don't remember whose turn it is to go first,
I
Julia.
think it's yours.
Okay. Um yeah, so obviously class like many English classics, class plays a big part in this. One thing I thought was really interesting is that Lucy, like I feel like in a lot of stories like this, like because it is a very like coming of age story, like you guys were saying, and like Lucy realizing that things are a lot more restrictive back home, and I feel like in a lot of those stories, Lucy would be like very upper class, but she's not. She's like I think pretty firmly middle class, and I also thought it was really interesting that her home life is actually pretty good. Like she gets frustrated and like of course her mom doesn't let her do everything she wants and like all of that, but it's not like that trapped in the ivory tower and like when will my working class prince rescue me like that kind of thing. So I thought that was kind of an interesting like subversion of the way that class is like used in a lot of these kinds of stories. Um and also like so Cecil I think I can't remember if he's like wealthier than them or not, but he's definitely like a little step above them in terms of like social standing. And so he looks at her home life and is like, "Oh my god, this is horrifying! Like, you sit in the garden, like it's
Oh, how quaint.
yeah." It's like basically the opposite of like in the Jane Austen novels where they're like in raptures over the cottage. He's like, "Absolutely not! Get it away! There's nature here." Um,
Him and me both. I'm like, oh,
yeah.
let me go inside, please.
Yeah. And then with George Emerson, I think that is also sort of a subversion because rather than being like very typical, like, I'm just a regular man with a big heart, it's like they're they're like socialists and so they are considered like the working class and everything, but it's not like the extreme version of that. So I actually thought there was a lot of subtlety in terms of the way that like the characters lived within their class. And also I think it's interesting that like class between Lucy and George isn't really one of the things that makes their relationship difficult. Like between her and Cecil or Cecil, the
However
way
you
that
want to call him.
yeah, the way that he interprets it, at least, like that is, and his kind of superciliousness and the way that that is connected to just like him being very insecure about his place in the world.
Yeah.
But I thought it was interesting that with Lucy and George, like that actually doesn't matter a whole lot. There's a lot of other things that are like the problem.
Yeah.
So I feel like that was a very like rambling just
No, it
monologue
made
on the
sense.
characters.
Not at all.
Yeah, I super agree with what you were saying, Kara. I thought you said one thing that made me think. Oh yeah, I thought it was so interesting that we got the full backstory of like how they had lived in their house before all their neighbors moved in, and because they were like so comfortable in their living that everyone was just like, oh, they're probably the remnants of some titled family who's been here for, however long. And they're like, no, we're just regular folk. And they're like, well, all right, well, we like you, so
Right, it's like by that point they're like, well, we like you though, so I guess it's fine. Like, yeah. Okay, the description this was like I really loved some of the humor in this book and how dry it was in the way that just the narration of some of these like absurd situations when they're talking about the house of like windy corners or whatever, and it's like the cube. Like they like built their house, like the old man like built his house in the shape of a cube because it was the best value. And then the mom added that one little tower like a rhinoceros's horn. Like, I thought that was hilarious. Like,
yeah.
The cube.
There was a lot in this book. Sorry, we'll probably get into this later, but like between like the humor and like the almost like caricaturization of the personalities, a lot of it felt very like Oscar Wilde to me.
Yes.
That's a really good comparison.
Yeah.
I like,
which is why I'm surprised you didn't like it more, Kara.
I love how you dropped that comparison, Julia, and then took a sip of your wine.
Yeah. You're like, I'm just saying, yeah.
Yeah, no, I do like this sort of like placement of Lucy in sort of like middle class, if not maybe a little bit upper middle class, especially since at this time middle class was still like a relatively new social status. Like it had just been invented like what, maybe 100 years ago. And I feel like there's still this element of still trying to sort of figure out like where you are, where you stand. And so like Lucy and her cousin clearly align themselves more with like the snobbish people that they are traveling with when they're in Florence. But it is like interesting. And I do like that she's not like this incredibly wealthy, like unattainable heiress. She's middle class, and for some reason, everyone decided to hate the Emersons.
But she's rich enough, though, that the whole time Charlotte has to be like, I'm sorry, I'm so poor, I'm such a burden upon you. Like, how poor are you? Like I don't understand.
I was like, oh my god, the scene where she like spends half an hour paying them for the cab ride, like oh my god. And then then Minnie, the little girl, is like, I don't understand why he gets the money though. That doesn't make sense. And they're like, shh, like, we're just trying to move on, Minnie. Like,
he owes me money. I get the money.
Don't worry about it. Like, yeah.
That, and then what her mom at the end, Lucy's mom, was like, oh yeah, you two are just alike. Like last night when you were trying to divide 2 apples between 3 people. I was like, not this again. Like, change all over.
Yeah, like I know we'll get to like Miss Bartlett, but it's like she is like such a good example of like people who is like, you are not a bad person and I am a bad person for disliking you, but you are exhausting. Like I can't. Like, also I do some of the things she does.
Charlotte, for someone who complains about being poor so often, really likes to sort of like, I don't know, when the Italian guy caught or like knew that George and Lucy had kissed, and she hands him like one simple coin and his silencio.
Buy yourself something nice. Like,
I know we'll get into it more. We're going so off track. I love Charlotte as a character. Like, I can't stand her though. Cannot
she's
stand her.
so well written.
But half the things she does, I'm like, you are me. We're the same person. Like when she was like taking so long to get ready and then showed up like so fashionable, and I was like, me. So me. She's like taking off her several rings at night. Every time she has any conversation, she's like, you know, I'm right? I was correct about what I said. I'm always right. Yes, that's me.
I like connected to like her passive aggressive over apologizing. Like I sometimes unintentional, but it's like, oh, I don't like this. Like, take this mirror away, E.M. Foster. I don't like this. Like,
who hurt you, Charlotte? Anytime you do anything, you're like, I'm sorry.
Yeah, and it's like the like being so self-effacing that you're like pissing people off. I was like, yeah, I've done that. Sorry. Like,
sorry,
over apologizing. Sorry, I'm sorry for being sorry all the time. Like,
it's the sorry. Stop apologizing. Sorry.
Very Canadian.
It's also like her apologizing multiple times and then going like, I'm not fit to be your companion. I'm so unworthy.
Your mother will never forgive me when she hears of this.
It's like, well, she doesn't have to.
Yeah.
Oh my god, the scene where we find out how the information got into the book about what happened. And like, because I did not see that coming. Like I was like, was Miss Lavish just like hiding in a bush somewhere?
Yeah.
Like I didn't know. Like, and then we find out, and I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? Like, she was so hypocritical. She's like, you cannot tell anybody. And then she's like, well, I did tell Miss Lavish, but it was at tea. And I'm like, what is that matter?
You told the one person who was a writer?
Who, like, does not shut up? Like, I don't. And then, like, it was really satisfying when she started doing her whole, like, oh, you're going to hate me. We'll never be the same. And Lucy's just like, yeah. Like she like doesn't play along. Like she's like, I made this horrible mistake, and she's like, you did. Like, good for you, Lucy.
Actually, yeah, you did.
Just super quickly talking about characters we relate to. I felt very called out when Cecil was like trying to read bad lines from a romance book while everyone was like, shut up, Cecil, because like if there's a book I'm reading and it's bad, I will not shut up about it.
And the way that he like phrased it, though, in the narrative, he was like, it was so bad, he had to read it aloud.
And the part where, like, he reads it and, like, nobody laughs, he's like, that's not the part I wanted.
There's a funnier part. Hold on.
Like, all of the worst people in this book had at least a couple places where I'm like, oh, yeah, okay.
It was really, like, write what you know of Forster.
Listen, yeah.
Because he understands the human condition, I think. He really gets it.
Yes. What was your original question, Taylor? I'm so sorry.
We were talking about
social class.
Well, we can move on to characters.
Let's do it.
We're basically I just talked about how poor Miss Bartlett is, and then we spiraled.
That's just what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Like, the questions are more of like a guide.
They're great framework.
Let's talk about Lucy Honeychurch, which, by the way, I love her name.
That's everyone's name.
But yeah, what'd you guys think of her? Any thoughts? On her or her journey, stuff like that.
I quite liked Lucy overall. I actually thought she was going to have a either slightly faster or more significant character development, actually. But I'm not like displeased where she ended up in the story. I just thought we were going to see more of that, because I even had like a tab color about like change, because there were all these early passages where it was like she could feel something, she wasn't really sure that, like there were so many allusions to that. I was like, oh, it's gonna be good. And then it's like the end of the book and I'm like, hey, Lucy, you gonna change now? Like, come on, you got this. But I did really like her as a character. I like that she just felt very, I guess we don't actually know her age, do we?
Yeah.
I think she was like relatively young, like maybe no older than like 23-ish.
Yeah.
I think maybe even younger.
I picture her like
'cause,
20, honestly.
Yeah, like 19 or 20 is kind of what I was thinking, but
Okay,
I have
cool.
no reason
So,
for that.
going off of that kind of assumption, anyways, she felt very like believably young to me, like someone who was just like, yeah, this is what I've been told is the way to do things, so I'll go along with it. Oh, but then I hear a different opinion and it kind of makes me think, that sounds kind of reasonable. Maybe I should talk to them more. And it's like, those are like normal experiences you have as like a teenager or young adult where you're like, oh, wait. Sometimes I can meet other people with different opinions, and maybe what my parents always said, or my church, or my teacher, or whoever, like maybe that's not the only viewpoint that's just unequivocally correct. Like, amazing. So I liked all that, and I think she had some really strong moments of where she like stood her ground that I really appreciated when those came out. Because if she had always been muddled, to borrow a word from the book itself, I would have been like super annoyed. But she had enough times where she was like, no, this is what you're doing and I don't like it, like saying that to people, where I was like, good on you, Lucy. Yeah, I like her. She's actually not my favorite character, but I do like her.
Yeah.
On the note of you using the word muddled, I was going to put in earlier, Cara, muddled is this book's version of unsheathed.
No, no. How dare you?
But Cara, what are your thoughts on Lucy?
So, I did also like Lucy. Something I thought was really interesting, like Julia, you were talking about, I kind of expected like a stronger, like a more significant character arc or change. And I think for me, what it came down to was that, yes, she did have a couple of like really fantastic scenes where she stood up for herself, or where she had even just like dialogue, and like I liked like the narration for Lucy, because it's sort of like third person omniscient sort of, or maybe not omniscient, I don't know, but it's like it's third person, but it's very like deep in like what Lucy is thinking and feeling, and all of that was like great. Like there was so much like nuance there. It was so thoughtful. Like a lot of the really profound quotes about life that I like marked are like about the way that like Lucy is feeling, or the narrator is explaining the way that Lucy's feeling. But when it came to her actually like talking to people or doing things, I feel like she had very few scenes where she did. Like just like a lot of her dialogue sections were very bland, and like we knew that there was all this like deep stuff going on under the surface, but like when she's talking to Cecil, it's like we wouldn't know that she had all of this going on. You know what I mean? I'm not sure if I'm explaining it very well, but like
No, I
I
follow.
feel like the narration had to keep stepping in and being like, this is what she's thinking and feeling. Like this is why she's an interesting character. And I'm like, I'd like to see her have some agency. Like I know that like that's partly the point, is that she doesn't have a lot of agency at the beginning of the story, but even like you can have characters who are struggling to make their own decisions who still have like interesting conversations and like actions, and like I feel like she really didn't until close to the end of the book. Like
where she
the
has
first
like 4 chapters in a row of lying to people.
yes, that was funny. And then like I thought it was hilarious too how like all of the chapters had those like funny titles, and then chapter 12 was the 12th chapter. Like I thought that was so funny. But yeah, it's like when we get to the point where like Lucy, like all of a sudden she's like, I can't marry Cecil. I can't stand him. Like from then on, she actually was making choices and she had interesting interactions with people. But prior to that, she was just kind of like there, in my opinion. So.
And I fully, or rather, I don't fully even understand kind of why she gave in to his third proposal either, for that matter. I'm like, what changed?
That really was like glossed over.
It was just like third time's the charm. She's like, whatever, I guess.
Like I got out of like
it'll get him to shut up.
It's like, Cecil, if I don't have to hear your voice again, I will say.
If it'll get you to stop asking me to marry you, fine, I'll marry you. Jeez.
Yeah. And he's like, nailed it. Like,
yeah. She loves me.
Cecil's just like, okay.
Oh, Cecil.
What were you saying, Cara, though?
I think I was kind of like wrapping it up in a very confused, like, a muddle. I was like, basically, I think that all of Lucy's strongest characterization was stuff that the narrator had to explain to us. And so that made her feel a little underdeveloped to me, even though we had so much great, like, thematic stuff about her and her journey. I feel like very little of it was related to what she actually said or did until the very end.
I think that's very accurate.
That's a very good point. I really liked Lucy as a character. I liked sort of being in her head, and I liked that her sort of development wasn't always linear. And one of the reasons why I did think she was no older than 23 is that, like, a lot of times she would, like, form an opinion, and then someone who was, like, older than her or more influential than her would say something different, and she's like, oh, well, that must be true.
Right.
And it sort of takes her a while to get to the point where she's like, wait a minute, just because they say something's true doesn't mean, like, I have to believe in it. And it felt just very realistic to, like, how it is growing up when you start to sort of, like, think more about, like, how the people close to you see the world and what they think and believe. And that's when you're like, oh, maybe, like, I can have my own opinions and they don't have to be how everyone sees them. And I just really liked that journey, though I do agree with you, Kara. She doesn't say a lot of it. A lot of it seems to happen, like, internally. And it would be nice to see her, like, if not say anything, take a few more actions. Like, one of the things I liked, going back to comparing her to Anne Elliot, is that, like, once she starts gaining her confidence back, Anne Elliot starts doing little things. Like, when her family's like, oh, we need you to do this, she's like, well, I said I'm going to go visit my friend, so I'm going to go visit my friend. And, like, it's not her being, like, outwardly, like, very, like, no, I'm standing up for myself, I'm girl bossing this up. It's just, no, this is what I said I was going to do. I made a promise. I'm going to do it. And I think something like that would add to, like, Lucy's character a bit. Moving on, George Emerson. What do we think of him?
Julia's eyebrows, right?
My sad little depressed baby boy. Bless his heart. Yeah, George, I think even more so than Lucy, because we get more scenes with Lucy. It's like so much subtext trying to figure out this character, right? You're like, okay, like, clearly he loves her. Why? I don't really know, but I'm invested still. Like, I just kind of jumped in head first and went along for the ride with those two, because I'm like, I don't really. I think I don't know. She did her little bow as she was leaving, and he's like, someone who respects me, who's a female around my age. I'm in love.
A good girl.
Yeah. A good girl. Yeah. Okay, and this, I don't know if anyone else got this. This is what I kept thinking of, because that's the way my brain works. So multiple times he got described using the word creature. And so all I could keep thinking of was Frankenstein's monster. Because, like, he's muscular. He's so emo. He just keeps getting described as, like, very quiet and kind of, like, awkward. He's, like, skulking in the shadows amongst tombstones. Like, I was just like, yeah, he's my little Frankenstein boy. I care a lot about him. He's so sad.
I mean, have you ever seen George Emerson and Frankenstein's monster in the same room?
Think about it. Yeah, I liked George. I agree that he had even less development than Lucy. And, like, the thing I thought was so, like, surprising to me when I was reading this book is, like, okay, well, one of the things I did know about this is that it was a love story. And so we're, like, halfway through the book, and I'm like, have they talked? I was like, there was, like, I mean, they had that weird meet cute where a man got murdered.
But they had a great first kiss.
They did, and, like, that was one of those things where it's like they're talking about, like, when you're just overwhelmed by, like, the beauty, and, like, the sun was in his eye, like, all of that, and I'm like, I buy that. Yeah, like, I could feel, like, the chemistry between them, but I still was like, I think I need more reasoning for, like, when he's like confessing his love to her, and I'm like, really? Like, I just, like, it's a great speech and I loved it, but the way that he's describing like how devoted to her he is, and I'm like, my dude, like, I don't have, like, they've had like one conversation or maybe two that we've like seen, and it just like, it was really strange to me. Like, they barely interacted, and I thought, like, I don't know. It's like I buy it and I don't buy it because, like I was saying, like, when they're in scenes together, it's so good. But they have so few scenes together that I'm like, I just don't know if I'm like sold on the intensity, and like not just intensity, but like truly like they love each other, and like we
Love,
see that
love.
at the end. Yeah, like the exactly the love. Um like I completely believe that they are capable of feeling that for each other, and I think that they make a really good couple, but I want to see that. Why didn't you show me more of that, E.M. Foster? Like, we got so much of Cecil. I'm like, could we just like take out like 3 of Cecil's scenes and replace them with George scenes? Like I don't even have like personality descriptors for George. Like, we got to his big like speech, and I'm like, I had no idea you like felt this way. I honestly thought you were supposed to be like Mr. Strong and Silent. I don't have feelings. Like, I
Oh,
love that you have feelings, but
I
I had no idea.
disagree.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I guess we do see him like get emotional in a couple of parts, but like it felt like out of nowhere. Like, I could not describe George as a person. Like, maybe a little bit by the end, but
I mean, one of his personality traits is clinical depression, so there's
Yeah,
that.
that's
for
true.
real.
Yeah,
We love a
it's
depressed
true.
king.
Yeah, and I did still like, I did care about him and feel for him a lot, like out of all proportion to the amount of characterization he had. But I'm like, I could have loved you even more, George. Like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And maybe I missed this, but was the book also trying to insinuate that because he was like an atheist, that's why he was depressed?
no, I don't
I don't
think
think so.
Okay,
so.
I
Because
might
his
have like
dad
misinterpreted
was.
that.
Yeah,
I might
Unless
have
and
that's why he
also,
had rheumatism, was because he was
yeah,
an atheist.
well, but also, like, I didn't even necessarily get the feeling that we knew how George felt about that one way or the other. Like, his
Okay.
dad's always talking about how he raised him with these ideals, which I thought was
Hmm.
like an interesting kind of parallel to, like, oh yeah, you baptized your kids when they're so little and they have no say over it, and it's like he did kind of the opposite of that, and I thought that was an interesting comparison. But I don't think we ever get an indication
Okay.
of how George feels either way. I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then I might have just misinterpreted that. I will say I will forever hate Mr. Eager for being like Mr. Emerson killed his wife in front of God. And I was
On the moment I read that, I was like, Mr. Eager, we got beef because I know you're wrong. My man would never. He would never.
I thought maybe it was something like maybe it was an accident, like maybe somehow
Right.
he acts I don't know, he was holding a knife irresponsibly and she just walked into it or
And
something.
she ran into my
My
knife.
knife
Right.
10 times. Yeah.
I thought it was like maybe he accidentally killed her for some reason.
Yeah.
But it
I
was
was
like,
thinking like Northanger Abbey, where like she was absolutely
Mm.
miserable in the marriage, and then when she died it like kind of felt like emotionally he killed her, you know? So that's
yeah,
kind of what I thought.
That's a rude assumption that
Okay.
anyone would be
I
unhappy married to this fantastic man, Kara.
I did not love Mr. Emerson. Like, there were things about him I liked, but I don't know. I found him frustrating in his own way. Um
Silently takes a sip of
I
wine.
know.
Mm-mm.
I
Like,
think you might be the dissenter on this one, Kara.
yeah.
We can talk
I
about
did
Mr. Emerson now. He's on the list.
okay. I did like him. I guess I just like, I felt like the book wanted me to like him more than I did. Um, and I do think, like, obviously the way that he and George were treated by the other tourists was like awful and like so ridiculous.
They had
Um,
no reason to do that.
yeah, like it was very weird, and I don't like dislike Mr. Emerson. I guess I just like, I feel like, and I think this was intentional on the part of the author, but I feel like he was doing a lot of the same things that he was like judging other people for. Like, he made a big thing out of like being more accepting and stuff like that, but also, I don't know, he was still like raising George to think his way, you know, and nobody else's, like that kind of thing. And I don't feel like he was as um as self-aware as maybe he thought, but like he is a sweet old man, and he is kind, and like I do like him. I guess I just like I didn't completely love him. Like when we have that scene at the end between him and Lucy, which is great, but I feel like the narration is saying like how like what a genuine like the most wonderful person she ever talked to, and like all of this, and I'm like, I don't think so, but okay. I'm sorry, Julia.
But I think he's allowed to think that because that's his son. He's like, that's my boy.
No,
Like,
I don't mean about. I mean like the narration about Mr.
oh,
Emerson
gotcha.
I feel like was trying to make the reader feel like he's the best character in the whole book, and I'm like, I disagree, sir.
Oh, I think he is.
I have different favorites.
Okay, because I think there's obviously like a lot of like very, I was going to say obvious, but I just said obviously. There are obviously a lot of obvious reasons to like appreciate him in the text that are like, oh, look, he's so progressive, and oh, he's a caring father, and like just those, and he says like really beautiful poetic things. So like I like all of that. But what cemented it for me, the reason I like him so much as a character, is because he is like the embodiment of my favorite trait. He is so earnest. This man just cares and like says what's on his mind and is so genuine, and I just really like that. And I like how even when he messes up, he's like, I'm gonna go apologize to those people. I can get across the line. Like I just like melts my heart. So I really like that.
Yeah, he is like a really genuinely like good and kind person. I think what kind of got me hung up on him is like when they're touring all those places, and I don't know, just cuz like I know a lot of people like this where like he makes a big deal out of how like accepting he is, but he also like if you go into a church, he's like, well, you're an idiot, like like that kind of thing, which I understand is like intentional, and he's still a very good person, but I think that is like, especially as I've gotten older and I've known more people like that, I find that kind of narrow-mindedness frustrating, and especially because like even when he's being accepting, he can be condescending about it in his own way.
Yeah,
and
that's
that and that happened, I feel like, a lot with him, like when he's actually like doing stuff and talking to people, I'm like, you are lovely. But when it's more about how he like, I don't know, viewed people or viewed the things that were important to them, it like wasn't, I didn't like love him as much.
He's definitely like a flawed character, but I mean, I was automatically going to be on his side once he was like, hello, Charlotte and Lucy, can I do this wonderful favor for you? And Charlotte was immediately like that, that like little clip from the Bratz where Chloe's like, and like everything they do, everyone's like, you suck.
I know. It was honestly weird. I'm like, what have they done that you could even like misinterpret as being like awful?
Literally all he did was like exist as a socialist, and everyone was like, well, he's the worst, we hate this man, and he's like, I'm trying to do nice things for people, I'm sorry.
I'm pretty sure at one point he was like, yeah, the English monarchy isn't all that, and they're like, shut up. Shut up.
And it was funny too, because like even like Lucy and her family are actually like fairly progressive, like in terms of their politics, like we hear about, and then they talk about the Irish question, and I'm like, okay, so not as much as you thought, like.
But then also later when Cecil's like, and I'm in favor of democracy, and she's like, you don't even know what democracy is, shut up. She gets so mad at him. It's like, oh.
Anytime Cecil got yelled at, I was like having the time of my life. Like,
what
drag him,
clown. Which I mean, unless we have anything else we want to say about Mr. Emerson, we can move to Cecil.
I'm fine with that.
Cecil,
the man I love to hate, like
the man, the clown, the legend.
He's okay. I kept thinking while I was reading this, I was like, he is that classic, like when we do our like year-end wrap-ups and we talk about like the most trash men and everything, he is like a perfect example of like, okay, some of the characters that we read about are like actual abusers and, you know, murderers have done terrible, horrible things, but I'm like, Cecil just viscerally like gets to me.
Because we've
In
all known a Cecil.
Condescending.
We do. We all know a Cecil. And like the way, oh, just like the way that so one of my favorite characters, or one of the characters that like I think I liked a lot more than the book wanted us to, was Lucy's mother. Like,
Yeah.
I really liked, she's just like doing her best, living her life, being nice to people. Like, there are moments where I'm like, I see why Lucy is very frustrated.
Like
but
her weird
overall,
opinion on women writing novels.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, yeah. It's like,
but that's like such a mother-daughter thing. Is like, overall, like most
like,
moms are not like this toxic person, but it's like you are gonna beef with them anyways, just because you're mother and daughter. Like,
or it's like we are like super close, but like there's this one thing I'm like, I can't talk to you about this. Like, we can't like
I was gonna say it's one of those things where like you're talking to your parent and they like express a view you would never heard them say before, and you're like, whoa, okay.
Like let's put that away for now. Like I can't deal with this right now.
Put a pin in that. Okay.
Yeah. I don't even remember why I brought up the mom. Oh, the way that like she's describing the way that Cecil acts and the way that he like treats her and the way that he like looks down on like literally everything they do. Yeah. And it's not even stuff where like, you know, sometimes we read like classics from like ye old 1800s and it's like, okay, obviously modern readers don't see this as being like tacky or inappropriate, but I can see how in the period like this would have been considered very tacky and inappropriate. It wasn't even like that. It's like the stuff that like when she I might have even saved the quote, I don't remember, but it's like talking about how Cecil like despises her because she cares about like she fusses about puddings or something.
Yeah.
And I'm like, she is a good mom and a good person. Everyone leave her alone. Like I just yeah. I'm sorry, we were supposed to be talking about Cecil and I just went off on like defending.
But you're right though.
Yeah, no, it plays into his character. He's marrying a woman who's like he can't stand her family, and not for any like legitimate reason.
Yeah, like they're all pretty nice actually. Like I like his mom. Freddie is like hilarious. Like what?
Love Freddie.
he's very himbo, very frolic of him. Like oh, and that part. Okay, the part where like finally George is like speaking and the mom is there and like he says something, she's like, oh George, you're clever, I hope you didn't do that to Freddie. I'm like, oh poor Freddie, but also like this is really hilarious. Like and Lucy has that moment. And like Lucy has that moment of realizing like, oh, I think my mom and George would actually really get along, which again, that's something that I think in a lot of this kind of story, like if Lucy was this like wealthy upper class woman, it's like her mother would be like, get your dirty hands off of my daughter, and instead she like really likes George. Like I don't know.
Yeah,
I just made this about her again. Sorry.
It's fine.
I'm like, forget Cecil.
No, okay. So the thing with Cecil is like, first of all, just like so pretentious, so annoying. Like why? It's like mind-boggling how he thinks he's so right about the dumbest opinions. And then he like takes stances on things that are so dumb and unimportant that it just like pisses you off. He's like, I won't play tennis. And it's like, everyone is playing tennis. Just hang out with everyone. Why are you being a loser about this? Like, it makes me upset.
And like the way like we've all talked about how much we enjoyed the writing style, and like the way that the narrator is talking about like Cecil refusing to believe that like sometimes being polite is like, I'm terrible at this game, but like you guys want to play, so I'll make up a fourth. It's fine, you know? And like yes, it's like I viscerally felt all of that. Like Cecil just the worst.
There's something so delightful in how like annoying and condescending and snobbish he can be while also being so pathetic. Like when he asked Lucy if he could kiss her and she's like, I guess, sure.
And he's like Okay, I guess I will. I don't know.
And then he's like, he had this vision of him like wrapping her up in his, like, I think they use the term like manliness, like in his manly arms. And she's like, no, no, Cecil, I mustn't. And he's like, please kiss me. And she lets him. And she's so like overcome with how manly he is. And it's this whole fantasy he has. And I'm like, Cecil, this is sad.
And he's so petty. And like literally canonically petty, like is a word that they use multiple times talking about him, which is hilarious to me.
Canonically petty is like, yeah.
And like I still can't get over the fact that Lucy was like, oh, let's write to the Allen sisters and lease them the place. And he's like, I will undermine this and I'm going to find a different tenant just to be a contrarian. I'm like, what?
And he set her up with the love of her life out of spite. Like, just, what a clown. I can't.
Yeah, not only doing that to like undermine whatever her plan was, but also thinking he was gonna like really stick it to the, what was the guy's name?
Right, the old like gentleman who
the guy who's like in charge of that, who he hated for whatever reason. I'm like, okay.
He also, like, all of the times where like he's just being like cynical and like nasty for no reason, and like I feel like he is such a perfect like example of those people where it's like they make such a big deal out of like, oh, I hate like small talk, I hate like all these, and it's like, okay, yeah, nobody like gets excited about talking about the weather, but there are these like little polite things that we do to like make society run smoothly. So get over yourself. Like, I don't want to like have a like philosophical argument with you about you don't like being asked like how your day's going, because everybody always asks that. Like, it just, Cecil is bad.
Like when
get over yourself, like, Cecil.
Skip the small talk. I want to know what your greatest fear is. Sir, I'm just heating up my lunch in the office kitchen.
I know, it's like,
just ask me how my weekend was, please.
It's like, sir, this is a Wendy's. Like, it's really like...
But see, that's one of the things about Cecil that for me, it was like the Amy March dilemma of like people who hate Amy March so much because they like see the parts of themselves that they don't like in her.
Oh, that's me.
Looking at it, and I'm like, there are some things that I don't want to recognize here, but I do see Army, like, oh.
Yeah. I mean, we've been talking about, there's a lot of characters in this book like that.
Yes.
Where it's like, I came out to have a good time.
And then E.M. Forster wrote this character, and I'm honestly feeling so attacked right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, I kept thinking of the Facebook meme that's like, I'm in this picture and I don't like it.
That's the meme of the live show, is just a cast photo of the movie with I'm in this photo and I don't like it.
I did look up the cast for the Helena Bonham Carter film, and I haven't seen it yet, but I'm like, this cast is kind of like lit.
Daniel Day-Lewis.
I know.
I'm so excited to watch it.
Do you know where I can watch it?
Oh, I don't know if your library.
Now. I'm just curious.
If your local library has Canopy, I think it's on there. Canopy with a K.
Yeah. Okay. I might have to watch it.
And maybe Amazon, but I don't know.
So, did we talk about Miss Charlotte?
A little bit.
Officially.
We can talk about Miss Charlotte. Sorry, I think I heard my cat meowing. Let me see where he is.
Gotta check on the boy.
If you have the discussion with Miss Charlotte, I can hear you.
Perfect.
Okay. I mean, just like generally what we've been saying, it's like, you are exhausting and infuriating, and also I have been you. Like, there's like a couple of things she does where I'm like, ooh, okay.
Yes.
Yeah, and also like, she's just that person where it's like, you are not at all a bad person. I am a bad person for disliking you so much, but you get on my nerves. You get on my nerves so much.
Yeah.
Like, and it's not fair, but that's how I feel. Like,
well, and the wild thing about her character is like, for literally the majority of the book, because I'm I'm like live texting Sarah every single one of my thoughts, right? As you would want if you had annotated the book for someone. And I'm like, what is her backstory? Who is her lover who jilted her? Like, I know there is something going on here. There are hidden depths that we are just not going to get into. That's going to drive me mad. And then we get to the ending where he's like, yeah, this is probably like her way of kind of like righting a wrong that happened in her past. And I'm like, I knew it. I said the whole time. Because there's that part where she, after George kisses Lucy the first time, and she's like, he's a cad. I've known men like him. Not to be prudish. I'm like, you've known men like him? What men have you known, Charlotte? Tell me. I want to hear the story.
I want the deets, yeah.
And I'm like, actually, honestly, kind of pissed we didn't get more of the story. I really didn't want to know it.
I know. We just get that hint at the very end that it's like, did she know the whole time? Like, Also, Taylor, I love that you were like literally holding him like a baby that you're gonna burp. I think that is freaking adorable.
You're like, wait, I hear my boy.
Hiccup. I don't know much about how cats work, but he definitely made some noise.
Look at that baby. I'm sorry. I'm so distracted by how cute he is.
I think, Julia, you need to write the prequel.
Yes. Okay, this and then 8 Cousins.
Miss Bartlett regrets.
2 books I need to write prequels about.
This one and which one?
And 8 Cousins, because I need the history between Rose's mom and Mac and whatever her dad's. No, yeah, his Uncle Mac, right?
Yeah, the doc.
Yeah.
I don't remember.
Or Alec. Mac is his
Alec.
son.
I think it was name. Alec.
Alec, and then whatever her dad's name is. Yeah. Wow. Taylor, have you read 8 Cousins?
I have not. I've never heard of it. My brain keeps going.
So the thing is, duology. Second book is better. Both books kind of mid anyways. But the fact that the main character, she's like an orphan, but it is like canonically true that her mom was like in a love triangle between her father and his brother. Like, I can't deal with it. It's real. It's in the book.
In the second book, I picked the right love interest, which like never happens for me. It was
I did not.
Thing. Yeah.
I messed up severely.
Yeah. Oh my god, yeah. I still can't get over like on a scale of 1 to 10, how strongly did you resolve the love triangle? Like anyway, yeah, there's like some real messy parts in terms of like, oh yeah, you can tell this was written in like the 1800s, but there's some like truly
goodness?
No, like racist
problematic.
But if you read it anyway, there are also some like really beautiful like character moments. Like there are like moments of the romance where I'm like, I'm gonna think about this forever, like rent free. Like I just love it.
So what are these books called again?
8 Cousins, and then the sequel is Rose in Bloom. It's Louisa May Alcott. It's the same author as Little Women.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
For some reason, I didn't know she wrote other books.
Yeah, surprise.
Yeah. And Taylor, if you do pick them up, you need to like update us on all your thoughts and on who you're pulling for. Like,
yeah.
I will. I'll see if Libby has it.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, probably.
Miss Bartlett. That's who you're talking about. I feel like I just like agree with what we've been saying about her. That like she's like unimaginably frustrating, and it's like she would be, oh my god, like when Lucy is just like describing like what it's like traveling with her, and I'm like, I can't handle it. Like that would be like not stressful. What's the word I'm looking? It would just be like so
infuriating. Is the word I think of.
Yeah, and oh my god, like the scene we talked about where she's like paying for her cab, and she like literally wastes an hour of everybody's time, and they're all like, "We're fine, like just stop it," and she keeps going. So she's such a well done character. Like I would absolutely not be able to handle knowing her in real life, but she's so well written, infuriating. Yeah.
My favorite Miss Bartlett apology, I think, is not even an apology, but like my favorite one of her like classic like self what word am I looking for?
Deprecating.
Yes, like self-deprecating moments is when they're like going to sit down and there's like those tiles and she's like, "No, Lucy, you sit on the tile because even though your dress is thicker than mine, it's white. So I'll sit on the moistest part of the grass in my dress."
She
In
picks
the mud.
she picks like the wettest part of the grass to like make a point of sitting down, and then like Lucy just looks at it. She's like, "Fine, I'll leave," and she just like, oh my gosh.
She drives me nuts. I love her. She's too much.
Yeah.
I just love how dramatic she is. Like, honey,
Yeah.
there was no need to do any of this.
Mm-hmm.
You're dramatic too. Him, not you guys.
Yeah, I knew exactly who you were talking to.
Yeah, the little baby.
One time, side note, one time I came home late because I had to stay at work until 7. So I came home at 7:30, which means I was late to give him dinner. And I opened the door. He meowed angrily at me and proceeded to walk out the door towards the stairs. He was so mad at me. He's
He's
"I
like,
can't even look at you. I'm going to
I'm out of here.
this was your last chance. Like,
He's got like a little haversack. I was like, I've never seen anything so dramatic.
yeah. Yeah. Oh, I love that.
What a guy.
So this is a long question and it ends up being another Julia question. But I have so in this book it seems we're sort of at both the turn of the century but a turning point in how like women are sort of seen. There's a sort of attempt to slough off these ideas of Victorian politeness and gentleness associated with womanhood. But there's also seems to be a tight grasp on things like remaining pure and chaste. Gender?
Thoughts on gender, ladies?
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No. Finish what you were saying.
I just reading the book a lot, especially with like Cecil and Miss Charlotte, but I think all of the characters just sort of bring this up, where there's just these broad statements made about like women or men, but a lot of times it's like, I think at one point Cecil's like, he calls to, I think, Lucy sort of like she's a dog. He's like, "Come over here," and he's like, "Women like to be led."
Yeah. Oh my god, yeah.
And like even
Cecil.
Emerson is like trying to like be nice and like give Charlotte and Lucy their rooms. He's like, "Men don't care about views. Women love views."
Women love a view. And I'm like, are you telling me that like men would like, I want a concrete box of a room, thank you. Like,
which is so
flowers
weird.
are for girls.
Well, and you also just could have said like, "My son and I don't mind what our view is, but you are specifically talking about wanting a view." Like, it was that easy. The setup was there. You could be like, not generalizing your entire genders, but okay.
And kind of like I was saying with the like criticism, but also clearly there's more he needs to unpack about how he feels about other countries that are not England. I feel like there's some of the commentary on gender that is like really like clearly very intentional. Like, yeah, the way that Cecil treats Lucy, and also we get all these comparisons to like she's like a Leonardo, like she's not smiling and it's even better than if she like very like literally objectifying her as like a piece of art to like give him enjoyment. So there's all of that stuff that's great, but then there's those things like the book starts out with that sweeping generalization about like, you know, women and their feelings. They like looking out windows. Like, so there's stuff where it's like, I don't know if this is intentional or not. Like, this might just be E.M. Forster, like, women. Am I right? Like, I don't...
Women be shopping, women be gazing.
Yeah. And I think a lot of the times that we get those lines, they are from characters like Cecil, who we are obviously not supposed to like, but there's enough of them that aren't that I'm like, I have questions. Like,
I think we had a fair few lines too from characters where I think it was George who originally said, and then Lucy repeats, he's like, "Men like him take us back a century." Like, I can't stand him. I'm like, yes.
I love that whole speech. And when he's saying like he doesn't even want you, he wants you to like be the thing that he thinks you are. Like, all of that was like fantastic. And then I think like it's weird that because Lucy is like, I can't say that I'm breaking up with him because of another man, because that's what men always think women do. And I'm like, it's true, but also like, then why did the book get written this way? like it, I don't know. It's yeah. Also, oh, when Cecil's like having that argument with one of the many arguments he has with Lucy, and she's like genuinely criticizing like actually unpleasant rude things he's done, and he's like, well, like you seem tired, and like women get upset when they're tired, and it had the same energy of like, are you on your period? Like it just was like across centuries. I was like, this guy, like I just
I loved when she like called him out. She's like, it's not about the headache.
yeah,
like,
yeah.
Okay, sorry, you just broke up with me. I'm still processing. I might say some stupid things. Okay,
Yeah.
sorry. Like,
Yeah.
that was really great.
Yeah.
What was one like scene I wanted to reference. Now I can't remember what it was about gender. When Mr. Emerson is talking about like men and women becoming comrades and like Eden and all that, I was like, oh, this is a nice thought. Like, I don't fully understand what you're saying, but I like the idea of it. I just like you, Mr. Emerson.
Yeah, I thought there was a lot of like really interesting gender stuff, and obviously like George Emerson and Mr. Emerson seem to be like more progressive of the men. Go ahead, Julia.
You reminded me of when George was like, I want to have you in my arms and for you to like have your own thoughts. I was like, swoon.
I know the bar is like so low, but it's okay because
it was great. Good though. It was real good.
His whole like declaration when he's like just loving that she's an individual like person, and I'm like, wow. The romance of respecting women's agency. I love it.
Oh, side note for a thing I didn't mention when we were talking about George, but I think I first fell for him when he threw Lucy's pictures away because he didn't want her to look at the board.
Me too.
I know. He's a tender-hearted boy, and I love it.
He's like, I just didn't want you to like be re-traumatized, and I didn't know what to do, so I panicked and I threw them in the river.
And yes, you're probably traumatized because we left that man's corpse there.
They just leave, and they're like, Italy.
Isn't there a police officer you should be talking to, giving witness statement?
No? Italians are too poor and dirty for policemen, Taylor.
Yeah, like, they don't have that.
Yeah, like there were some like really great early moments with George where even though it's like I still don't feel like we got as much personality description for him as I would like. There were like moments like that where I'm like, okay, I don't know that much about you, but I do love you. Like, kind of the point of the book, I guess.
Yeah, I do think that's the interesting thing about George is like we did get actually so little of him when you like look at the whole of the book, but it didn't really affect my investment in him. Like I could tell he was a good guy. I was rooting for him. And I was just like, you're really awkward. You're barely here. I think I like you. Hopefully this turns out okay for you, my guy.
Yeah.
I liked him.
And also it was like, he was such a like very quiet character, and like we didn't see a lot with him. And I think even a lot of the things that, like the scenes that he did speak in, his dad was talking more than him, so he just like George is just kind of there. But then when he does like actually get his moment, I'm like, George, like love it, like it was worth the wait. I think like...
Again, Frankenstein's monster, silent, and then all of a sudden like, I'm gonna say the most beautiful thing you've ever heard. Like yeah.
What were you gonna say, Taylor? Sorry.
Yeah, we cut you off like 3 minutes ago, so I don't know what you were
sorry.
No, it's fine. Is there anything else we'd like to sort of touch on with gender?
I don't think so specifically.
Okay.
Just flipping like.
I have 2 more questions before we go to quotes, and one of them I actually don't know if you guys know, but the first one is the ending of the book I found pretty both surprising and not. Like Lucy and George have eloped and have gone back to Italy, but in doing so have isolated themselves from their family and friends. What did you sort of think of this ending? Also, was it just me or were they getting a bit like spicy.
Yeah.
The fact that they were like, oh, hold on, let's lean down so people on the street can't see us through the window. I was like, saucy, this is spicy right now. Like,
I mean, was it like, am I mixing this up with something else I was reading around the same time? Like, was she like on his lap at one point?
I think she
Something-
was.
Yeah.
Something like that. I was like, Lucy, okay.
Go girl.
Yeah, so I like the romantic resolution and the way that played out, but it does really it keeps me from fully enjoying the ending that, like, yeah, they have cut themselves off from everybody else who cares about them for what I feel like is like no reason. Like, I don't know. And I guess we're supposed to see it as like all they need is each other. And I'm like, okay, your mom and brother were kind of cool though. Like, they were nice. Mr.
Mhm.
Beep was nice. Who's yeah.
I like Mr. Beebe. Yeah, we
Can
didn't
we
really
talk
talk
about him at
him.
one point?
Good
'Cause,
guy.
like,
Oh, yeah, we
he
can
was
totally talk
one
about
of my favorites. I
liked
loved
Mr.
him.
Beebe a lot.
He was
Yeah.
great. Like, just what a he was like funny, he was progressive, he was like always there to help. Like,
He was
what a
sane.
good egg. Yeah, what?
He was sane. Like,
Yeah.
he was like the Emersons suck, and he's like, no one's talked to them.
He was like the fact that he was just so normal and that was like iconic in this book. Like, but he was also one of the characters that I feel like really like goes against the trends of these kinds of books, because as soon as we're introduced to him, it's like he's the parson. I was like, okay, so he's gonna be
here we
like
go.
supercilious and like annoying, like all these things, and it's like, you're great actually. Like,
Yeah.
Mr. Eager
Yeah.
is like the one who sucked, but like Mr. Beebe, I love him. Every time he was like on page, I'm like, look at you just being a good person, being funny, helping your niece. Like, yeah.
I love that our introduction to him was Charlotte and Lucy being like, oh, Mr. Beebe. Like, they're so excited to see him. And the narrator's like, he didn't remember them as well as they remembered him, but he was still like, oh, hello.
Yeah. I was surprised at how much he felt like the main character for like a lot of this book. Like,
He was very, very relevant.
which I
Like
like.
changed events. Changed
Yes.
the course of events in this book.
And I feel like he was also the most, in my opinion, he felt like the most like developed, like consistently developed character, where like I really felt like I knew him very well, like throughout the book. Like he had a more, I think, like strongly defined personality than some of the other characters. I feel like I got way off your original question, Taylor. What was?
Yeah, what were we
Yet
talking
again.
about?
We were talking about the ending. of the
Oh
book.
yeah, okay. So yeah, that like, it's like, yeah, I was mad about that. Like, I love the romantic resolution, but I don't like the way it. I don't think this is intentional, but it feels a little bit like, okay, so you can choose one. Like, you can either be romantically happy or you can also stay in touch with people who care about you. And it's like, her family does not dislike George. They
No.
hated Cecil. Like, why can't you guys, like, I don't know if we're supposed to see this as like, oh, she's free. I'm like, but you don't have to like stay in your same life forever in order to stay in contact with people who love you. I don't know. It was weird.
Maybe I was hurried trying to finish the book. I just read it as like, this is like a honeymoon. Like, they just ran off together, but maybe they're not necessarily staying in Italy forever.
Well, I
they're
thought
talking
it was
about-
a honeymoon. Yeah, I thought it was a honeymoon too, but I got the impression that like, oh, we burned that bridge. Like,
yeah, they're like,
No,
hopefully
because
they're able to forgive us.
but they made such a big deal about like George's dad needing him to like look after him.
I
He's
know,
old
like,
and sick.
there's like so many reasons where I'm like, this makes no sense. Like, why?
I'm trying to go back and see, but from what I remember, like, I think they eloped without telling their family, and they're like, I don't know if they'll forgive us for this, but maybe they will.
Yeah,
Um,
seem pretty unbothered by it either way.
Yeah, like, I don't know. I feel like maybe you should.
Well, okay, because they know Mr. Emerson is staying with Mr. Beebe, who's a great guy and is going to look
Mhm.
out for him. So he's covered for the time being. You know, Freddie and Lucy's mom kind of have each other. They're doing their thing. I don't know.
It's more, it's not that I don't think they have anybody else to take care of them. It's like, I didn't like that we finally get a story like this where Lucy actually has a really good family life and she just like dumps them. Like, That's what I found weird. Not like, oh, nobody's gonna have someone to look after them. I was like, Lucy and George, how could you? Like,
But I
why?
don't think they
Why?
dumped them permanently, is how I'm reading it, though. I think they were just
Okay.
like, sorry, we're eloping and none of you were involved in this. So, like, that's kind of not cool of them to, like, incorporate their very lovely families into, like, their wedding because they all love each other. So, why shouldn't they? But I don't know. In my opinion, it wasn't like, especially because, and this somewhat has to do with Sarah's notes, because the end scene is like back in a room, right? And we have a lot of that symbolism throughout of like George being the one who's like passionate and has these encounters with Lucy out in nature. And then Cecil's like literally has a conversation where he's like, you view me as a room with the curtains closed. And like,
she's like, I do. Isn't that funny? And he's like,
yeah.
devastated.
And this end is kind of like the in between. It's like they're inside, but the window's open.
Oh, that's
So
a
I
good
guess
point.
I didn't really view that as like their ending point, but just kind of like a callback to like, oh, this is where we met. And
Okay.
where will our
I
lives
like-
take us from here?
I like the symbolism of the ending in terms of the rooms. I hadn't thought of that, so I like that a lot. I guess I was feeling. I thought the impression we're supposed to finish the book with is like they only need each other, and I'm like, you can have other people too. Like it's not. I don't know, but
It's allowed.
I like that. I like that interpretation a lot better.
Yeah, especially like you bringing in like her biggest interactions with Emerson being out in the open.
Mhm.
Cecil is just closed off room, no beauty, no air. It's a little bit musty.
What is it?
Musty.
What is it that she says to him? Okay, wait, I have to find this because like it was, it was like KO'd. Like it was so bad. I have to find
Finish
it.
him.
Yeah.
Hold on. I'm sorry. We could keep talking. I just need to find this part.
It's fine. But I do like the idea of like them one being back where they started with like the first act of kindness that the Emersons show Lucy. And they're in the city where they met with like a nice view, a room with a view, if you will. But I do really like that reading, Julia.
Yeah. Okay, this is kind of like and I know we're not really into quotes yet, but when because a phrase came to her and she accepted it, you're the sort who can't know anyone intimately. A horrified look came into his eyes, like he just everything she says to him, he's just like, this is the part where I'm like, Cecil, you're the worst, but also like, ouch, like that's
like,
rough,
Lucy,
buddy.
You do not have to go in on him. Like,
I know.
One of Sarah's annotations, I think at that line or something very similar that she said was like, LOL virgin. And then she put an asterisk and was like, being a virgin is fine, but we're allowed to make fun of Cecil for it because he sucks. And I was like, yeah.
I like the helpful context there. Yeah.
She's like, not all virgins are losers, but Cecil is. Like,
just not all men, but this man.
Not all
virgins, but this one.
Oh my gosh.
God, he's such a sad, pathetic little man. I love him. And it's made even worse by the fact that like he takes the breaking off of their engagement. Like he's sad about it, but he's like very respectful.
And she hates it. She's like,
oh.
She's like, you are being so nice about this. I want to kill you right now.
I was dying because you guys will know from like Poor Miss Finch and several other examples, that is my favorite thing. Like when a man gets rejected and he's like, you're right, I'm not even worthy of you. I'm like, stop being sexy right now. You're not supposed to say that. You're supposed to be angry. Like, don't do that.
Well, it's like I've said this before. It's like I love how in multiple Jane Austen books, it's like the big romantic moment is like, I will love you until the day I die. If you're not into that, tell me. I will leave you alone forever. And I'm like, oh!
Yeah, I'll suffer in silence without you.
I love it when a man has boundaries. Like,
you're gonna respect my no? Oh my god! I'm telling you. Um, so, in doing some research for this book, I found out that I don't know if any of your guys' copies of the books had this, but neither the audiobook nor my physical copy had this. There's an appendix in some editions of the novel titled A View Without a Room, written by Forster in 1958, that discusses what happened between Lucy and George after the events.
What?
Yeah.
I was unaware of this.
So,
wait,
Julia's like, excuse me for a minute.
1958?
1958. He died in 1970.
I can't even believe he was alive that close to our time. Isn't that weird to think about? I guess I just don't think about usually like the books that we're reading, like even being close to the time that we're alive.
I know.
That's like he existed when my parents were alive, right? That's wild.
That overlap is so weird.
Yeah.
So, let's see. It is Forster's afterthought to the novel that he quite clearly states that I cannot think where George and Lucy live. They were quite comfortable until the end of the First World War, with Charlotte Bennet leaving them all her money and her will, which is nice of her. But the war ruined their happiness, according to Forster. George became a conscientious objector and lost his government job. He was given non-combatant duties to avoid prison. This left Mrs. Honeychurch deeply upset with her son-in-law. Mr. Emerson died during the war, shortly after having a confrontation with police over Lucy's playing the music of a German composer, Beethoven, on the piano. Eventually, the couple had 3 children, 2 girls and a boy, and moved to Carshalton from Highgate to find a home. Despite their wanting to move into Windy Corner after Mrs. Honeychurch's death, Freddie sold the house to support his family as he was an unsuccessful but prolific doctor.
Freddie! Why is he prolific yet unsuccessful? I want to know that too.
He's like killing his patients.
Vaguely concerned, yeah.
Immediately after the outbreak of the Second World War, George enlisted, seeing the need to stop Hitler and the Nazi regime. He was unfaithful to Lucy during his time at war.
That little bitch!
I'm sorry, this sequel is not canon. Erase it.
Lucy was left homeless when her flat in Watford was bombed, and the same happened to her married daughter in Nuneaton. George rose to the rank of corporal, but was taken prisoner by the Italians in Africa.
I'm so stressed out. Why would he write any of this?
He's like, you know what? He's like, I'm getting older. I want to ruin everyone's happiness before I die.
Literally like Ghost at a Watchman, except I think he did this of his own volition.
Well, it's like, you know how like in fanfic, there's either like the really cozy, comforting, like, I just want these characters to be happy. Here's my little fluffy fic. Or like, I'm going to put these guys in a situation. Like, that's this kind.
This like, is literally all the situation.
This is like I swear, like 90% of like Secret Garden, like fan fictions that I have like come across, they're the ones that happen afterwards. They're like, and then Dickon died in the Great War, and I'm like, okay, probably, like historically, I'm sure he would, but I did not want that kind of realism here. Get out of here!
Why would you write that?
How dare you? Like the number. Okay, I don't even read a ton of Secret Garden fan fiction, but the number of times that I have come across one where it's like, and Colin and Mary reconnect over Dickon's grave, like just awful, and not necessarily romantically, but like just they're having like emotions about Dickon being dead, and I'm like, why would you do this?
I hate it.
Unnecessary.
Yeah.
But good news, George gets out. Once the fascist government in Italy had fallen, George returned to Florence, finding it in a mess, which, like, yeah, of course it's in a mess.
He's like, ew, there's even more poor, dirty Italians here.
They keep coming. He was unable to find the Pensione Bertolini, stating that the view was still there and that the room must be there too, but could not be found. Forster ends by stating that George and Lucy await the Third World War, but with no word on where they live, for even he does not know. He also adds that Cecil served in information, or whatever the withholding of information was then entitled, during the war, and was able to trick an Alexandria hostess into playing Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata by claiming that Beethoven was Belgian, not German.
What? What an unnecessary detail to include.
Like, is that like a signal for a spy or something? Why does it like, oh, he could...
That's his little reference to Lucy's, like, I just want to hear some Beethoven.
I think that was it. Like, I think at one point Lucy like plays Beethoven.
Right, and I remember you saying that. So why was he trying to get this woman in trouble? Was she like a bad guy? I don't know.
No, I think it was like he wanted to hear music that Lucy played again, but obviously
about to die. Is that why he wanted
Germans at the time?
Yeah.
I
have a lot of questions, but like the biggest one is just why would you do this?
That whole description stressed me out so much.
Honestly, the thing that ticked me off the most, because I'm like, sure.
Cheating.
Yes. Okay. Because I'm like, it makes sense that George would be a conscientious objector.
Yes, absolutely.
The war, especially the First World War, which like never needed to happen. It's like one of the most unnecessary things to happen in history. Second World War, it makes sense that he would enlist. Yes. Like all of that stuff, even like him returning to Florence after all of these wars and sort of going like, oh, we're not these kids anymore.
Yeah.
I'll allow it.
But the cheating?
George would never.
Yeah.
George would never.
You're the one who gets cheated with, not cheats on.
Like,
you're in the wrong part of the equation, my guy.
You're the side piece, George. Yeah, like I feel like the phrase like people use a lot is like, oh, now stories belong to the readers, and I personally feel like that can be overused. Oh, sometimes like I don't have completely positive associations with that, but this is one of those times where I'm like, get your hands off E.M. Forster. Like, no, George would never. Get out of here.
Like, where did that come from? Couldn't tell you.
No. But yeah, I was just curious as to whether or not you guys had read it, and I can tell that you haven't.
No, because we're outraged.
I wish I could erase it from my brain, actually.
Okay, but if I had to suffer through reading that Wikipedia...
Yeah, it's like everybody has to have... Yeah.
None of that is canon, though. Hate to break it to you, E.M. Forster. None of that happened.
Like, that's a really depressing AU you wrote, but...
Yeah.
For something that has, like, for the most part, a very happy ending. Like, why would you do that?
Unusually happy. I was convinced, like, I was talking about my vague impressions about the book. Like, I thought it was like a tragic romance kind of thing. Or not, like, the very, like, quietly tragic that is, like, so much worse than, like, Romeo and Juliet.
Poignant romance.
Like, a like, empty loneliness kind of tragic romance. And so when it's, like, a happy ending, I'm like, wow, like, impressive. I mean, weird about the family thing, but, like, hey, cool. And then E.M. Forster's like, hold my tea. Like, let me just, like, ruin everything.
I was reading that and I was like, there's no way Cecil would have cheated on Lucy because that man has no game.
George,
like, George, yes, I can see him having game, but I don't think he would cheat on Lucy, but I know Cecil would never. That man doesn't even know how to kiss his own fiance.
He sure doesn't. Bless his heart. It's like, at some points, it's like wild to me because Cecil sucks so much that I almost start to feel bad for him. Then like, don't fall for it. He's the worst. Like,
it's like you're so awful. You're so awful that I even feel bad for you for being you. Like,
yeah. I start to be like, well, he's just like an idiot. I'm like, no, he chooses to be this bad.
Yeah. Well, that's why it's like when Lucy like breaks up with him and like he just has these like revelation after revelation about like what an absolute trash can of a human being he is. That's when I'm like, ooh, okay, well, like you do suck, but also I do feel kind of bad for you here. Like this is like not that I was very glad that Lucy did finally break up with him, but just I mean the fact that like just one after the other, she's like you are nothing to me. Like
the line. So Sarah's annotation is fair request TBH when he's like, I shall never forget your insight, and dear, I only blame you for this. You might have warned me in the early stages before you felt you wouldn't marry me, and so have given me a chance to improve. I'm like, Cecil, don't be like this.
I'm like,
you're right.
He's got a point, yeah.
Communication is important.
Yeah.
like, hey, Cecil, maybe you could play one game of tennis once. Hey, Cecil, no one wants to listen to you read this romance book to us.
I mean, we do, but they don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ooh, sorry.
Because he
Right?
also kind of does the like, I'm gonna leave you alone forever. Bye. And I'm like,
I
I mean,
know.
this is not a good reason to like marry somebody, so I don't want that to happen. But
No.
like, hey, the man has some self-awareness now. Like,
No.
I hope he uses it well.
Because that's exactly what happened. Is above that line, I wrote, "Okay, kind of hot though," and then he said, "Oh," and then in the text it said he answered reverently, and I went, "Hot, yeah," and then on the landing he paused, strong in his
Yes.
renunciation, and gave her a look of memorable beauty. For all his culture, Cecil was an ascetic at heart, and nothing in his love became him like the leaving of it. And I went, hot?
No,
3 question marks? Like
that line, nothing in his love became him like the leaving of it. I was like, oh, that is so good. Like
so good.
the writing of this book is just like chef's kiss. It's so good. I have a lot of quotes for this one, actually.
There's your segue into the quote section, Taylor.
Thank you, Julie. I appreciate that.
Perfect.
Okay, does anyone have some quotes they'd like to share?
Should we just like go around like, because I have a lot. I feel like Julia
Yeah.
has a lot.
So normally when I'm not annotating in the book, I'm like typing them into Bookly, but I only typed one into Bookly, so a lot of this is going to be me flicking through and like randomly selecting something that I tabbed. So it'll be fun.
Okay.
Let me find the one that I actually bothered to type up though. Who said this? Hold on, let's find out. It's in my edition, page 174. I feel like it's going to be a Mr. Emerson, but we'll see. Oh, maybe it's George. Oh, it's George. Bless his heart. Okay. So he said, there's a certain amount of kindness, just as there is a certain amount of light, he continued in measured tones. We cast a shadow on something wherever we stand, and it is no good moving from place to place to save things, because the shadow always follows. Choose a place where you won't do harm. Yes, choose a place where you won't do very much harm and stand in it for all you are worth, facing the sunshine. That's so beautiful.
Isn't that the part that right after, like, Lucy's mom is like, babe, don't do that to Freddie? Like,
I think it is.
He'll hurt his brain.
And yeah. I see you're going to be clever. I hope you didn't go behaving like that to poor Freddie.
I'm imagining Freddie as this one guy who is like a Bachelor in Paradise contestant who was just not the brightest. And whenever he would try to string a sentence together, you would see a vein throbbing in his throat. And it's like, oh, you're so close, honey.
Listen, I love Freddie. He's such a sweet little guy. And you have to think too, because we're thinking of Lucy being so young, and this is her younger brother. So he's like, what, 17, 18? Like, he's a bebe. So
yeah,
he's just a little sweetheart.
And a future doctor, apparently.
And a future prolific doctor.
But unsuccessful.
So unsuccessful, he had to sell his family home.
I'm like, I think Freddie might need to be arrested. Like,
yeah. Well, our like introduction to him is just him like staring at a bone, and I'm like, whose bone? What kind of bone? I need more information about this bone.
I had forgotten that.
Yes. It's him, a medical textbook, and a bone, an unspecified bone.
My first one is from Mr. Beebe, appropriately enough. It's at the very beginning, and he's telling them about how nice the Emersons were about the room. Lucy was pleased and said, I was hoping that he was nice. I do so always hope that people will be nice. I think he is. Nice and tiresome. I differ from him on almost every point of any importance, and so I expect, I may say I hope, you will differ. But his is a type one disagrees with rather than deplores. Like, yeah. I think
good description.
Yeah. And like, again, like Mr. Beebe just being a much more accepting person than like his character type often is in these books. But
Yeah.
So I was listening to the audiobook, but I happened to be close enough to my book and my tabs to go ahead and tab it.
Nice.
It is obvious enough for the reader to conclude she loves young Emerson. A reader in Lucy's place would not find it obvious. Life is easy to chronicle, but bewildering to practice, and we welcome nerves or any other, I don't know how to pronounce this word, shibboleth?
It was such a cool word. I was like, what does that mean?
That will cloak our personal desire. She loved Cecil. George made her nervous. Will the reader explain to her that the phrases should have been reversed?
I love that section.
Love
But
that.
I also love like life is easy to chronicle but bewildering to practice, because
Yes.
it feels so much like when you're like reading a movie, and you're like, why didn't the character do this? But
Yeah.
like if you were in their place, it would probably be a lot harder.
Like you wouldn't know you're in a story. Yeah.
It's the same energy as the quote, I think even later, maybe also Mr. Emerson, who's like, life is like trying to play a violin, but you're learning how to play it as you
it's
live.
a quote.
Yeah,
it's a quote from someone else.
Yeah. He's quoting like a friend
who's apparently like my edition actually had very useful footnotes. And there weren't too many of them, and they were very concise and to the point and just very relevant. And one of them was about like that poet, I think, that like so when he's claiming this friend of his, it's like this was a real poet.
I love
that. Yeah. Or Julia, it's your turn for a quote, right?
I have one ready to go. So there's multiple iterations of this quote, but I just love the word choice so much. So I'm going to go with the first instance that it occurs. No, he is not tactful yet. Have you ever noticed that there are people who do things which are most indelicate and yet at the same time beautiful? And I loved that repetition of like indelicate but beautiful, beautiful rather than delicate. And I was just like, that is such a great notion, and I love that a lot.
Yeah.
This is like the first time that Cecil like compares Lucy to like a Leonardo, and it's funny because like Julia and I like have talked before about like how we tab very differently. We have very different tab styles. Like I don't go in for motifs usually unless it's connected to themes, but this is one where like I was like I love this use of like comparing her to an actual piece of art and like what that says thematically. And so Cecil's just like kicking back thinking about like, yeah, I'm gonna marry her. She finally said yes. He had known Lucy for several years, but only as a commonplace girl who happened to be musical. He could still remember his depression that afternoon at Rome when she and her terrible cousin fell on him out of the blue and demanded to be taken to St. Peter's. That day she had seemed a typical tourist, shrill, crude, and gaunt with travel, but Italy worked some marvel in her. It gave her light, and, which he held more precious, it gave her shadow. Soon he detected in her a wonderful reticence. She was like a woman of Leonardo da Vinci's, whom we love not so much for herself as for the things that she will not tell us. The things are assuredly not of this life. No woman of Leonardo's could have anything so vulgar as a story. She did develop most wonderfully day by day. Like, the word choice and the, like, what that says about, like, not wanting women to speak, because it's more beautiful when they don't. Like, the idea of somebody having a story being vulgar because it's a woman and she's just supposed to be, like, mysterious and beautiful. Like,
Or she's supposed to be what you tell her to be, sort of.
Yeah.
I also, just related to that, not sharing a quote, one of my tab colors was all about like sunlight and darkness and shadow, because that was so like almost heavy-handed in how often it was used. I was like, I love it, give me more.
So the one I have is when Lucy is breaking it off with Cecil, and he says, I have never known you till this evening. I have just used you as a peg for my silly notions of what a woman should be. But this evening you are a different person, new thoughts, even a new voice. What do you mean by a new voice? She asked, seized with incontrollable anger. I mean that a new person seems to be speaking through you, said he. And it's like, Cecil, why do you have to like come in and be like really like insightful at the 11th hour?
I know. Just in time for us to feel a little bad for him as he gets his heart shredded. Yeah. I love that, like, a peg to hang his idea of a woman on and everything. Like,
Yeah.
it's so good. And that's another thing where it's like interesting because the way that the book talks about gender is like so smart and so thoughtful, but then also like the fact that she's copying George's words, like it literally is the voice of a man. You know, like it's interesting.
Yeah. And I will say Lucy does immediately go like, "What do you mean? There's no other man speaking through me. What are you talking about?"
Yeah,
I
she's
love
like,
the recognition.
she like he hadn't even like thought about it, and she's like, if you think I'm in love with someone else, you're wrong. And he's like, no. She's like,
That's
good,
not
because
what I
I'm
was
not.
implying.
Julia, do you have one?
There's just so many. Okay, I'm flipping through at random.
Okay,
So
do you want me to go?
no, okay,
Or
wait, I have one.
go.
I have one. It's just a Lucy moment that I like, where it was after they were playing tennis, and George asks, "Do you mind being beaten?" And she was going to answer no, when it struck her that she did mind, so she answered yes. She added merrily, "I don't see you're such a splendid player, though. The light was behind you, and it was in my eyes."
Yeah. But also, like, I love that it's so funny, and it also made me think of their kiss with the violets because of the light being
Yeah.
so
Yep.
good.
And the
So
fact
good.
that they're flirting right in front of her fiance, I was like,
I
ooh.
know. I know. Spicy drama. I also like this is when their like family and friends are told about the engagement, and they're all getting all like excited and worked up, and they talk, like the narrator talks about like, yeah, that weird thing about engagements is like even when you don't care, you kind of care. And
Mhm.
that part, um it has a strange power, for it compels not only the lips, but the very heart. The chief parallel, to compare one great thing with another, is the power over us of a temple of some alien creed. Standing outside, we deride or oppose it, or at the most feel sentimental. Inside, though the saints and gods are not ours, we become true believers, in case any true believer should be present. I thought
Ooh.
that was really beautiful.
Yeah.
And I think
Okay.
that's like interesting too with like the different characters' views on like religion and like belief. Like I just so good.
So the last quote I have, because audiobooks make it hard,
Yeah.
when is like part 2, chapter 19, when George Emerson is saying to Lucy, "It isn't possible to love and to part. You will wish that it was. You can transmute love, ignore it, muddle it, but you can never pull it out of you. I know by experience that the poets are right. Love is eternal."
I love like there it's been a while since I read a book where it's like not only did I get this many quotes, but like I want to copy them out onto something. Like this is like
There are
ugh,
beautiful quotes in this book.
beautiful.
Yeah.
Like think I only updated Goodreads twice, or like I started the book, I updated once, and then I finished the book. And my one like actual update was 20% of the way through, and I was like, I don't think I've ever cried this much at the beginning of a book just because I kept reading beautiful things, and I was like,
Yeah.
overwhelmed.
I actually did not cry at this one, which is interesting.
I cried several times.
You made up for it. You took it. You took care of it.
This is what I confessed to this yesterday while babysitting because we watched Coco, and I was like, oh, it gets
Oh
me
my
every
god.
time.
Oh my
And then
god.
I was like, I'm a movie crier, I'm a book crier. You girls should just know this
Everything.
about me.
Yeah, yeah. Coco, like truly, like I just accept that no matter how many times I see that movie, I'm like, I'm gonna be crying through the last half hour, and that's just how things are gonna be.
Hmm. Oh,
It's going to get me every time.
Yeah.
I just found one of my notes that says sobbing, so I guess I can read that one.
Yeah, do it.
Uh, oh, I think this is close, maybe to that kindness quote that you read, Kara. But George says, "My father has that effect on nearly everyone," he informed her. "He will try to be kind." "I hope we will all try," she said, smiling nervously, "because we think it improves our characters. But he is kind to people because he loves them, and they find him out and are offended or frightened." I was like, that's so beautiful.
Yeah, and the idea of being like frightened by how genuinely somebody, yeah.
Yeah. Well, and it makes me so sad too, because especially in the beginning, like Mr. Emerson is so kind to everyone, and all they do is meet him with like reproach and rudeness. And it's like, it must be so hard to be like so genuinely kind and to have everyone just not like you for no reason.
Yeah, like they hadn't even like spoken to him, and they're like, ugh, them. Like it just, yeah.
Yeah. But I almost feel like he doesn't even, not that he doesn't like realize, but he almost just doesn't care because he's so nice. And he's like, these people are going to judge me, but I'm going to spend time with them because these are my my fellow travelers. And I'm like,
actually, super quick while we're talking about Mr. Emerson, I was so happy that like when the coach driver like kissed his girlfriend and everyone was like, kick her off of the coach. We cannot look at her. And he's like, why?
yeah. Like, why should we separate these lovers? Let them have fun. I'm like, okay, yeah.
Yeah, like, yes, it's inappropriate to kiss your partner at work, but why is everyone like, someone get this slut off of
Yeah,
there?
I do think it was maybe a little dangerous. It's like, since he's driving them somewhere. but yeah, they're like, get this Italian whore out of our sight. Like, actually, like, okay, do you know what that made me think of just now when I said that? Is like, there is like a kind of pasta. It's called pasta puttanesca.
Yes,
literally,
it's in a series of unfortunate events.
Literally whore pasta.
Wait, is that really what it translates?
Yes, because it was like you make it with like vegetables and like things that you might have laying around. It's like quick, it's like easy, it fills you up, and it's like those slutty ladies of the night go home and need to make dinner for their children, and like a whore. It's like literally like whore pasta. I can't get over it. Like, I just wanted to share that fun fact.
I think you could also make the connotation too, like, it's easy, just like a whore.
Yeah.
But like, I feel like now, especially since like I feel like people tend to put like a more positive connotation on like the term like slut and whore. It's like,
the pasta is delicious, okay? Like, all it means.
Like, sorry, maybe the prostitutes just have taste.
Maybe they're just great at making pasta. Like, I think. Anyway, that's like neither here nor there, but like that is one of the weirdest facts, and I had to share that with everyone.
I'm glad you did.
I'm gonna be thinking about it forever.
Okay, and it's the funny thing about it too is that like it's become pretty divorced from like what it actually means. So you'll see it on the menu in like super nice restaurants. It's like, would you like some whore pasta? Like, we do a lovely whore pasta here. Like, it's
Garçon, some whore pasta here.
Yeah. Your finest whore pasta, please. Like, oh boy. Okay, so I have more quotes too. Sorry.
Hit it, because I'm still searching.
Yeah, this is when let's see. Oh yeah, Lucy's like wanting to just go and walk by herself, and Charlotte's like, whoa, no, you can't do that. Charlotte had once explained to her why. It was not that ladies were inferior to men, it was that they were different. Their mission was to inspire others to achievement rather than to achieve themselves. Indirectly, by means of tact and a spotless name, a lady could accomplish much, but if she rushed into the fray herself, she would be first censured, then despised, and finally ignored. Poems had been written to illustrate this point. There is much that is immortal in this medieval lady. The dragons have gone, and so have the knights, but still she lingers in our midst. She reigned in many an early Victorian castle, and was queen of much early Victorian song. It is sweet to protect her in the intervals of business, sweet to pay her honor when she has cooked our dinner well, but alas, the creature grows degenerate. In her heart also there are springing up strange desires. She too is enamored of heavy winds, and vast panoramas, and green expanses of the sea. She has marked the kingdom of this world, how full it is of wealth and beauty and war. A radiant crust built around the central fires, spinning towards the receding heavens. Men, declaring that she inspires them to it, move joyfully over the surface, having the most delightful meetings with other men, happy not because they are masculine, but because they are alive. Before the show breaks up, she would like to drop the august title of the eternal woman, and go there as her transitory self.
What a good quote.
Such a quote.
And the fact that, like, one of the things that I appreciate it so much is, like, when it's talking about how, like, hey, women want things even as you're keeping them at home. It's not written in a way where it's like, one day women woke up and decided they were people. It's like, it has always been this way. And, yeah, I loved it. The creature grows degenerate. Like, again, creature. It's like,
yeah, a lot of creatures.
Mildly inconvenient.
Also, so funny though, because I don't know why I like felt like I was gonna have to whisper. So one of my close friends met this guy who she was like, oh, maybe like if you're comfortable, like I'll share your numbers. You guys can like talk. And I was like, okay. And one of the conversations we had was like him after work being like, I think I'm going to go for a run and then just be a degenerate. And I was like, I relate to that so deeply. Like, what a great word choice. Like, sometimes you just want to be a little hermit in your home, not contributing to anything. Like, yeah, love that.
Contribute to
Love it.
society, I'd rather die.
Yeah.
I do that 9 hours a day already. I just want to chill out. Thanks.
Yeah.
This is not a quote, but while flipping through, I found this, and I can't believe we have not discussed the scene in which George, Freddie, and Mr. Beebe go swimming in the pond.
Go skinny dipping together.
Just
Have we
guys
not
being
talked about
rude.
that?
Two bros chilling in a hot tub. Have you seen that one? 5 feet apart because they're not gay.
Except
Yeah.
I imagine this pond as being like a meter wide. Like, I don't know why I picture it so small.
No, it
I
is.
picture
They
it
tell
like
us.
a well.
They tell us how small it is. It's like swimming in a salad because there's like they describe it that way because it's like there's so little water compared to how much grass and stuff, so you're just kind of like in a salad. Like, yeah, that scene was wild. Like, I truly.
It was so funny that they like recognized Mr. B, but they're like, oh, who are these unfortunate naked men running off? Like, oh, it's your brother and your crush, you weirdo.
And the fact that like their mom like tried to be mad about it, but like it was just so silly. She's like, "Oh, Freddie," like just Freddie being Freddie again. Like,
Who was it? Was it their mom? Someone like accidentally led them to where Freddie was in the bush, and he was like, "Hey."
oh my god, that was like. Oh my god. And like even Mr. Beebe, who like I would expect to be the most embarrassed about it, he's just like, "Hey,
What are you gonna do?
it's like, see you all on Sunday." Like, just...
Yeah.
Oh boy.
So amazing. What a scene.
It made the point of telling us like how pasty Freddie's shoulders were.
Yeah.
Or I think they said like snowy or something, but like in a way that was supposed to be funny, and I'm like, I don't know why that made it funnier.
I was like, I swallowed a pollywog. I'm like, ew.
That's so nasty.
He's just like, I'm gonna die. Like, honestly, like, is Freddie okay? Like, does he is just like, oh my god. Like,
and I found it. You're right. Freddie reared a freckled face and a pair of snowy shoulders. The frog. Wow. Very iconic. Oh, and part of Sarah's annotations specifically were about Cecil being a closeted gay man. So just for that context, it was really hilarious that Mrs. Honeychurch says, "Gracious alive, whoever were those unfortunate people? Oh, dears, look away." And she's like, yeah, she wanted both Cecil and Lucy to look away at the naked men because that goes along with my headcanon. And I was like, you're not wrong.
That's like a really interesting interpretation.
yeah.
I know.
I kind of pictured Cecil as like obnoxiously heterosexual, but
I also agree. I'm well, I don't know. I mean, I don't know.
open to the concept.
Yeah. I'm open to it, but I didn't immediately go like, yeah, I think you're right. But but it was funny that she was like, oh dears, look away.
Yeah, okay, I didn't think
her like covering Lucy and Cecil's eyes, like, don't
wait, wasn't Minnie with them? Or was it
Oh, maybe. Hold on. Let me go back.
That's who I thought. But if it's not, that's hilarious.
No,
like,
I'm pretty sure he's
Cecil,
there.
your virgin eyes avert them. Like,
I gotta find it again.
you must not look upon the man. Like,
Cecil's just like, what is that?
Okay, wait. Neither George nor Freddie was truly refined. Still, they did not hear Mr. Beebe's last warning, or they would have avoided Mrs. Honeychurch, Cecil, and Lucy, who were walking down to call on old Mrs. Butterworth.
So
also,
she
Mrs.
really-
Butterworth, I was like, they're going to see a syrup legend right now? I can't believe.
Yeah.
Another amazing name.
You're right, Julia. She's like, babe, look away. Like, close your eyes. Like, okay, no, you know what would be funny is like if Mrs. Honeychurch like covers both of them and like Lucy just covers like everybody's like protect Cecil.
No.
Oh my god. Yeah, that was quite a scene.
Mm-hmm.
I loved some of the descriptions of like Lucy playing music.
Yes.
She was tragical only in the sense that she was great, for she loved to play on the side of victory. Victory of what and over what, that is more than the words of daily life can tell us. But that some sonatas of Beethoven are written tragic, no one can gainsay. Yet they can triumph or despair as the player decides, and Lucy had decided that they should triumph. Like, I love, and that is so true. Like there are some pieces that even though they're like written very sad, it's like if you hear them a certain way, or like you get to the end and it's like, oh, but things worked out, you know, and it's like, how could you make, but you can. I don't know. Got me in my feelings.
Speaking of music, I feel like you're both going to appreciate this so much, but the part, okay, so Lucy's talking to George about music, and she was like, talking about how her mother like doesn't, she's just silly about it. She thinks I can't make out. Once, I said that I liked my own playing better than anyone's. She never got over it. Of course, I didn't mean that I played well. I only meant, of course, said he, wondering why she bothered to explain. And I was like, that is so Mr. Darcy, when she's like, I enjoy walking, whatever she says. And he's like, I know. Like, it's the same energy.
I love it. I love it so much. And because I knew immediately what she meant too. Like, she's not saying that I am the best player in the world. She's saying like, how do you even explain that?
But he just cuts her off and it's like, of course. Yes, I understand. Like,
women are also just not allowed to brag, and so like, people expect women to be like, oh no, I'm not that great, or
Jesus, sorry, that scared me. Doorbell.
Yeah.
Do you need to go check your door, Julia?
No, it's food that I ordered for when we're done. So.
Stay tuned,
yeah.
Yeah. I love, this was like just funny because it came out of nowhere, like Mrs. Honeychurch, who I love. I think it's Lucy is like complaining about Mr. Eager, I think. And she says, my goodness gracious me, child, you'll blow my head off. Whatever is there to shout over? I forbid you and Cecil to hate any more clergymen. Like this is like a habit. They just like sit around and we're like, I don't like this one. I don't like this. Like,
my goodness gracious me is like the best phrase. I love that. Like that's something I would say.
I love Mrs. Honeychurch so much. Like, I'm so glad that like the book didn't write her in a way that was like so ridiculous that we're supposed to think she's stupid, like, because she's also very insightful sometimes, like, and just like lovely and charming. Also, I have no idea what Bumble Puppy is. What is that? Why? Like,
who says Bumble Puppy?
That's a game they play.
Oh yeah. I pictured it as like, what? When like when you're a kid, you have like a tennis racket and a tennis ball and you're just like trying to keep the ball up and like that's your game. I pictured it somehow as like a group version of that. Like, don't let the ball fall. Like,
okay, there seems to be two definitions. The one that the book seems to be referring to is a game in which a ball attached by string to a post is hit so that the string winds around the post. So like tetherball.
Oh, tetherball.
Tetherball.
Yeah,
that's
the other one is a game of Worcester bridge that is played unskillfully.
Well, if they're talking about tennis balls, so like they played tetherball with tennis balls. Okay,
maybe it's like tetherball, but you hit it with a racket instead of your hand.
Maybe.
Yeah,
that would make more sense with the fact that they've they've like named their little tennis balls, which is so fun.
He's like, oh no, you
Saturn
can't use
because
that
it's falling apart and it looks like it has a ring.
Like all of those little things where it's like their family and like their like home and everything feels so like genuinely lived in,
Yeah.
you know? Like
Yeah.
I love it.
Because that's absolutely something a family would do, is just like give a nickname to something that's like falling apart.
Yes. And you say it in front of like visitors and they kind of give you a weird like, oh yeah, I forget that's not just something everybody does.
Yeah.
Like everyone knows.
By Saturn, I mean this.
Yeah. And this is like this fits in perfectly with Cecil being a dick again. One of the quotes I saved was because it's talking about how Lucy comes back from Italy and it kind of makes her like appreciate home like more. And it says she returned with new eyes. So did Cecil, but Italy had quickened Cecil not to tolerance but to irritation. He saw that the local society was narrow, but instead of saying, "Does that very much matter?" he rebelled and tried to substitute for it the society he called broad. He did not realize that Lucy had consecrated her environment by the thousand little civilities that create a tenderness in time, and that though her eyes saw its defects, her heart refused to despise it entirely. Nor did he realize a more important point, that if she was too great for this society, she was too great for all society, and he had reached the stage where personal intercourse would alone satisfy her. A rebel she was, but not of the kind he understood. A rebel who desired not a wider dwelling room, but equality beside the man she loved. For Italy was offering her the most priceless of all possessions, her own soul.
God.
Whew.
You, Forster, you've done it again.
Yeah.
You've done it again, sir. Oh man. It's just so good. Oh, also, why have we not talked about this quote from George? Wait. Nope, it's from Mr. Emerson. Sorry. The wrong Emerson. We both know that we come from the winds and that we shall return to them, that all life is perhaps a knot, a tangle, a blemish in the eternal smoothness. But why should this make us unhappy? Let us rather love one another and work and rejoice. I don't believe in this world's sorrow. That's so nice. And then he goes on and he's like, then make my boy think like us. Make him realize that by the side of the everlasting why, there is a yes. A transitory yes, if you like, but a yes. Like, that's so poetic and beautiful.
God, the people in this book speak so like thoughtfully and like it's so deep. Whereas like I wake up on Monday morning and I'm quoting that Firestarter or Firebringer musical where it's like, I don't want to do the work
today. I don't really want to do the work today.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like the only thing I say all Monday.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think in my mind that I'm Mr. Emerson, but in real life, I'm Charlotte going, I'm sorry, I'm just right all the time. I don't know.
I'll just sit right here in the mud.
The muddiest mud to ever mud. Like,
oh my gosh.
Charlotte, you don't have to. There's a spot. No.
I must. It's like the first or maybe the second quote of Charlotte's that I maybe not. Maybe it's like the third one. One of hers that I tabbed was like when they were trading rooms with them, and she's like, I will superintend the move. How do you do everything? Said Lucy. Naturally, dear. It is my affair. Like, yeah. Like, sorry, I just do it all. I will not accept your help.
But I will weep internally that I am alone. Yeah.
I will complain about it, but I will do it by myself.
Yeah. I thought like Minnie, we don't see a ton of her, but she was funny too.
Yes.
And also not obnoxious like
No.
kids like her can be.
Mm-hmm.
It says, Freddie possessed to a high degree the power of lashing little girls to fury, and in half a minute he had transformed Minnie from a well-mannered child into a howling wilderness.
And Cecil's on the side like, see, this is why I didn't want to play. Like,
Yeah.
shut up.
Oh my God, Cecil, shut up. Like,
Yeah.
I love the idea of Minnie just going absolutely feral, like getting on all fours and going,
yeah.
latching herself onto his leg by her teeth.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Go ahead.
No, you just reminded me. I'm gonna have to find it. I think it's Freddie at one point. Okay, go ahead. I'll just find it.
Okay, so it's after the part that you were quoting with the like Lucy saying, like, no, I don't mind being beaten. Actually, yes. And then she
Yeah.
says, the light was behind you and it was in my eyes. And then he says, I never said I was. Like, he never said he was a good player. Why, you did. You didn't attend. You said, oh, don't go in for accuracy at this house. We all exaggerate and we get very angry with people who don't. And I'm like, oh my God, like my family. Like, I
Yeah.
just, oh my God. Like, I just love their family so much, and that's why, like, we get to the end, and I'm like, what do you mean you don't care if you don't talk to them? I'm like, they're great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm gonna find the part that I'm looking for. I don't even remember when it was. I just, because Taylor, you were talking about like her like gnawing into him, into Freddie or whatever. What's the part? There's a part where Freddie like stops Lucy by grabbing her ankle. Like, what was that? He was like, wait.
I do like that his and Lucy's relationship really does feel like the like bratty little brother and the older sister who has to deal
And
with him.
who is like an absolute like doofus, but you love him.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
okay, it's like, so Cecil is like clown, derogatory. Freddie is clown, endearing. Like,
Affectionate,
it's
yeah.
we
Absolutely.
like,
Sides of the same coin, the
yeah.
clown coin.
Yeah.
Where is it?
Oh, okay. Oh my God. I can't believe I was like reading this quote and I'm like, oh, I feel like there were multiple parts. And then I like got to the part that I had forgotten was in this paragraph, and I just like had a moment because I love a like, by the way, like, love confession. And so when he says, I don't apologize, but it has frightened you, and you may not have noticed that I love you. And I'm like, like, I'm like, George, I don't even care that you don't have a personality. I love you so
There's
much.
just something about the way that George will go into like this full monologue of like confession that is so romantic.
Yeah.
And I just eat it up every time.
You may not have noticed it. Like, I don't know what it is about, like, oh, by the way, I'm in love with you. Sucks to be me. Like, that gets me every time I eat it up.
Mhm.
And this is the same paragraph you were talking about, Julia, where it's like, he's the type who's kept Europe back for 1,000 years. He's talking about Cecil. He daren't let a woman decide. Every moment of his life, he's forming you, telling you what's charming or amusing or ladylike, telling you what a man thinks womanly. And you of all women, listen to his voice instead of your own. Like,
It's so good.
it's so good.
I'm sorry. There's no arguing. It's so good.
Like,
It was like 3 pages of me being like,
yes, I know.
it's really good. A great confession.
And then later on that page, like, he's like, and I also have these bad habits, and I don't want to, like, this desire to govern a woman, it lies very deep, and men and women must fight it together before they shall enter the garden.
Yes.
Solidarity. Like,
Mhm.
I love that quote.
ugh.
Okay, this is not even a quote. This is just something I loved. The way, Cara, you've referenced a couple times when, just I guess in the narration, but mostly via Cecil, Lucy's referred to as a Leonardo, right? Like she's this mysterious, painting of a woman. She's an enigma, blah, blah, blah. But we also get Cecil being described as a medieval statue. And then also George is described as Michelangelo-esque, however they said it. I was like, that's quite an adjective.
Yeah.
And I just loved that they all got their own like little art reference and like the different things that it says about them. I think it was very clever.
Yep.
I really do like calling Cecil like medieval.
Yeah.
They do it multiple times, right?
Well, yeah. And then the last chapter is like the end of the Dark Ages. As I'm like, you got rid of Cecil, and so the Dark Ages are over. Is that what you're saying?
And then you can move on into like the Enlightenment and the Renaissance.
Yeah.
Michelangelo.
So when it says, like, here's another part that also does that, and this is when she's like stepping on his feelings. But to Cecil, now that he was about to lose her, she seemed each moment more desirable. Which, like, I read that, I'm like, oh my God, of course. But then it says, He looked at her instead of through her for the first time since they were engaged. From a Leonardo, she had become a living woman, with mysteries and forces of her own, with qualities that even eluded art. His brain recovered from the shock, and in a burst of genuine devotion, he cried, "But I love you, and I did think you loved me."
Don't do that to me.
Like, I think genuine is my version of earnest.
Yeah.
Like, I
Yeah.
just. Oh,
Yeah.
Cecil. Like it's to the point where I'm like I hated this man for like
Yeah,
most of
yeah.
the book. And then
Yeah.
we get to this part and I'm like, okay, like I kind of hope you find love someday. Like I
Yeah.
just like you seem to be working on yourself. Like
Maybe
He did
he goes to like early 20th century therapy.
yeah.
I mean, I hate to break it to you guys, but for your 3.5-star ratings,
I
we've been talking
know.
very passionately for 2.5 hours. So
No. I was having that same realization.
So maybe
Oh, okay.
consider a slight bump up is all I'm saying.
I love like as a like theater person and who has like argued about this a lot. Another Mr. B, love him. When Lucy is like playing and singing a song and he says, "It's a beautiful song and a wise one," said he. "Go on." "It isn't very good," she said listlessly. "I forget why. Harmony or something. I suspected it was unscholarly. It's so beautiful." And like I just think that's really lovely and true that like things that I mean, it's like with musical theater, if they call something like hummable, that is like the kiss of death. It's like your audience should not be able to have this song stuck in their head. Like, you know, it's just such a weird thing. So
Yeah.
I loved that.
It's like it's somehow like an insult, like you're being like, "Oh, that's so pedestrian," but it's like that's what makes it successful is that it becomes
Yeah.
ingrained in people. Like,
And
I don't
Yeah.
know why you're being so weird about that.
and having so many people react to it, isn't that like beautiful? Like, isn't that
Yeah.
like part of the
Yeah.
point is that it works this way on so many different people? Like, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Like, like it's like I love Stephen Sondheim, but I'm very tired of hearing like literally any composer like, well, it's not Sondheim. And I'm like, it doesn't have to, like it can be its own good thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like
Sondheim is good in his own way. You
Yeah.
don't have to be like Sondheim.
yeah,
Maybe
like
Sondheim made it too hard on purpose sometimes, and we should maybe slightly criticize.
we
Like,
should
I
pull
don't know.
back a little bit. I'm just saying, yeah. It's like the meme from Tangled where it's like, what opinion would have you like this? Like it's anything even slightly critical of Stephen Sondheim is like, I'm about to be murdered. Like
Yeah.
um I think that's all my quotes finally. This is one that you already shared, and this is not the part that I like stopped at, but I was like scrolling through and it said Lucy began to cry with anger, and I'm like, oh my god, same. Like
There's multiple times where she gets really emotional, and it's not because she was sad. She's just really angry. I'm like,
she's like,
yeah.
I'm so pissed off that I'm sobbing, and I'm like, wow,
Totally.
I really connect to this.
Me too.
There was one I saved. Hold on. I have to find it. Oh, why do I do this to myself? When she so this is actually when she's talking to Mr. Emerson at the end. And he's like, "You love the boy, body and soul, plainly, directly, as he loves you, and no other word expresses it. You won't marry the other man for his sake." "How dare you?" gasped Lucy, with the roaring of waters in her ears. "Oh, how like a man! I mean, to suppose that a woman is always thinking about a man. But you are." She summoned physical disgust. She's like, "No, wait, hold on. Let me brace myself for this comeback."
Yeah. Yeah.
I just love that.
Yeah.
Very endlessly quotable book.
It is.
Clearly, yeah.
Almost like the Shrek of books.
I think we can all agree, no matter what your feelings on any aspects, the writing, impeccable.
So good. So good. Yeah.
Yeah. Unless you guys had anything else that you wanted to bring up, Cara, you can introduce our next book.
Yes, I can. man, I should look that up real quick. Like,
It's 2 little books. Hint, hint.
oh, it's okay. George MacDonald. Oh my
Yeah.
God. Speaking of like surprisingly feminist, like, thank you for the reminder. I thought it was the Anthony Trollope for some reason, but yes. So we are going
Oh,
to be
thank goodness it's not
reading.
yet.
It's a bit of a chunky boy. Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
little. So the George MacDonald we're going to be reading, there's 2 very short like stories or fairy tales, so that's why we're doing more than one. And one of them is The Light Princess, which I have read before and I have loved, and it is also a musical, which is beautiful.
Whoa.
So good. The sound, like the cast recording, is incredible, and like I've never seen it in person, and I already love the musical. Because that's what's fun about being a fan of theater. And then the other story that we're reading is The Day Boy and the Night Girl, which I have not read, but I am like already in my feelings about the concept.
Yeah.
And I just want you guys to like brace yourself, because there is going to be a biographical section when we discuss this, because like I love George MacDonald as a person so much. Like he's one of those historical figures where like every time I find out something new about him, I'm like, really? Like I love
Aw.
him. He seems like a pretty good guy. And I'm gonna be having a lot of feelings about it, so I just wanted to warn you.
I'm excited. I've never heard of either of those stories, and I've never heard of
Yeah.
George MacDonald. So
Yeah. And I think like based on I've read a couple of other things by him, and based on that, I think I'm probably gonna be approaching these as like fairy tales with a little extra. So like since they are so short, I think that's going to be an interesting thing to discuss. But yeah, I'm so excited. And it's going to be on my channel, and probably I'm hoping that we can schedule it pretty easily because they're so short.
Yeah.
We'll see.
yeah,
We'll see.
I'm probably going to do the audiobook for both, and they're both like so short.
Yeah. I can't wait. So thank you for hosting, Taylor.
Yes.
yeah,
Thank
it
you.
was great having you both, and thank you so much to everyone who watches this or who watched this either now or later. And we'll see you next month on Kara's channel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.